Hey everybody, welcome to another video at my channel. I'm here with Sam, Aaron, and Covingsworth. We're gonna actually do an AMA and answer all your questions, or at least if we have time. The questions will be categorized, so we have technical, we have resource questions, opinions that we have, artistic questions, and career. We also have a miscellaneous question for Maxime, which is the one we're gonna be answering first. How are we all doing, guys? I'll start with Aaron.
Dude, I'm good. It's midnight. Feeling snoozy, but I'm chilling. Good.
He's chilling. Okay, he's going to be lurking. Aaron might not be through the whole
Yeah, I
video,
might I might have to dip early, but yeah.
but he'll give us many insights as he can. Cov, how are you feeling?
Yo, you're so good at intros.
I mean,
Yeah, he immediately slipped into the intro voice.
Yeah, how did
insane.
you do? It takes me like 5 try. Okay, anyway, I'm doing good. Glad to be here. This should be fun. Good to chill with you guys.
all right, glad to have you. And Sam, last but not least.
Doing well. I haven't done my ritual Mongolian throat singing to warm up the vocal cords, so I've got dead, sick voice.
Feel
But I
free to
think
just
we're good
do
to
it.
go.
Just like throughout the video, background music, just keep going.
That's true. That's true. If we hit a dead spot in the conversation, I'll be doing that.
We're gonna
Mongolian. One time I got up in front of my class in 5th grade and I Mongolian throat sang for like 5 minutes.
That's rough. That's rough. But are you as good as like the Sardaukar
That
chant
is.
in like Dune? Because then it's pretty sick.
No, it was pretty much just like a 5th grader like grunting. But I felt cool though.
That's sick.
Should feel cool. Took balls.
I remember trying it a lot after that one video went viral of like the guy in green doing throat
Yeah.
singing on a mountain.
Yeah, with the guitar, I was so inspired by that.
That was sick. All right, I guess we'll just get into the questions before this becomes a derailed conversation.
It's gonna get derailed.
Yeah. Okay, the technical questions. We'll start. We'll start with a probably most asked question here. How do you optimize large scale environments for performance and quality? I think a lot of people who use Blender or maybe also C4D are getting stuck with just the idea of having millions of trees and high poly landscapes. So, maybe go through the basics and then we'll get into some in-depth specifics. I'll start with Cov because Cov is probably our longest running Blender environment artist. You started before me at least.
Yeah. So optimizing large scale environment. So typically the way that I do it is I have 3. So mostly the thing that's really going to give you trouble is the trees and how high poly they can be because you want super high poly trees in the foreground. I have 3 different types of trees. I have high poly, mid poly, and low poly. And then I throw the low poly in the background, mid poly in the midground, and whatever. High poly in the foreground. And that's pretty much gets me as far as I need to get for optimizing the trees. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Like terrain is not really that big of an issue because you can just turn down the subdivision levels on it in the distance, and that's fine. And then I guess general optimization for environments. Well, I don't know. I guess, are you asking for specifically large scale, or would this also apply to for any environment?
This question is about large scale, but I mean, I think a lot of the things that we mentioned will actually be for any scene. But it's already interesting because the way you do it is way different than I do it. Like I don't have mid poly, low poly trees. I'm kind of a Neanderthal and just go high poly all the way through my scene.
Yeah.
It's mostly for me. Like I did a video on this on my Patreon, but I'll give some free tips here. It's for me. I have an add-on that is like to optimize add-on for Blender, and it actually shows you each image's size and the material size too, so you can go into your materials because people don't notice. Even if you're using images that aren't very heavy, the actual material, if you're using a lot of nodes and edits, they can get quite heavy in your VRAM, for Blender at least. And so what you can do is just optimize that material, make sure you're not making that many changes. Because I know landscape materials can get very heavy if you're doing a lot of procedural things in it. So sometimes it is better to just bake things down. Next to the tree models I use, as I said, I just use high poly all the way through. But I don't know, actually, does it make a difference? I don't know, Sam, if you use low poly models
Yeah.
for distant terrains.
So, from my experience in 3D and specifically like ray tracing, like we have access to this wonderful thing called instancing. So, when you have one high poly tree, it's not that much more tough to create 100,000 of that exact same tree. So I don't usually bother with different LEDs and such for different distances if I don't need to, because a lot of what I've found, the memory heavy bits of the scene come from like having a wide diversity of assets, not necessarily having a couple like large hero assets, because usually um because like if you have different sets of assets, oftentimes you're loading in unique textures for those and such, and of course more unique meshes. But if you can take a couple sets of trees and instance them across the entire uh, landscape, it's usually not that bad. But there's also the issue where there's kind of this balance. Like for instance, if you're scattering grass, which is another one of the questions up here, like you can have a fairly manageable grass mesh, which is on its own maybe only a couple hundred, couple thousand polys, but you can have millions and millions of grass instances. That large number of instances becomes a much larger contributor to the memory of the scene. So I found like there's kind of this.
Like, it depends on like the asset, right? Like for trees, I would say like it's actually like for me the opposite. I think is like I don't go for low poly assets. I normally go for higher poly assets, but then less instances. Like especially with grass and bushes, you merge them
Yeah,
together.
yeah, it's like there's a middle ground because your memory is kind of like the memory inherent to the asset and then the memory that it takes to the instancing memory, right? And it's kind of this additive thing where your memory doesn't multiply necessarily the more instances that have, but it kind of adds it together. So if you have 50 million instances, that's going to be a very large chunk of memory. And that's kind of, I don't know if it's completely independent, but it's somewhat independent of actually how complex the instance mesh is. So it's kind of finding the middle ground between like using the grass example, like combining a couple different grass meshes into a single mesh, like a larger mesh, so that you don't have to use as many instances.
Yeah, and but
So
would
Yeah.
you say that like the viewport performance will be better in like Cov's case? Because I think that I do notice when I do scatter these high poly trees and I get to a higher number, even if the scatter isn't showing, I do notice just Blender struggling more. I don't know if that might be. I don't know how Cov your scenes run when you're actually working
Well,
inside of it.
yeah. I mean, my scenes are pretty much like it feels very it feels very technical because I'm looking at something in the viewport that's completely different from what I get in the render. Like I'm not really working in the viewport. I wish that I could. That's why Unreal is so appealing. But um, I had an experience with the low. Actually, I kind of lied. I don't use mid poly trees. I use low poly and high poly trees. But with a project that I was working on where I had this giant jungle scape that went on for like 15 miles in the distance, and it was all these really high poly jungle trees. Um, I had the high polys in the foreground and the high polys in the background too, and the scene just would lock up. Like I just couldn't do it. And then I decimated them all and got them really, really, really low poly, and the scene was super fast. So from now on, I always separate high poly from low poly.
Yeah, I definitely notice a difference. Like, I think there is a limit. You can absolutely, like, as I said, Neanderthal it and just take your high poly mesh and scatter it. However, there is definitely a limit because I also, with the Rocky Mountain scene I did recently, it's a fairly, like, 3 by 3 kilometer mountain. And when you
Yeah.
scatter, like, trees on that, like the high poly trees, I could definitely notice it. It just, Blender itself started just, the performance in the viewport started tanking. The render initializing phase took a lot longer, even when I optimized all the scattering settings. So I think that was really just the instances number compared to like how high poly the mesh is. Like the trees were all like 1.5 million verts. it got a little high. I think there is a case to be made for really big scenes to use like low poly meshes in the distance, as you said. But you can normally, depending on the size, I think Neanderthal it with just a high poly mesh and just scatter it.
Yeah.
I don't know, Aaron. Do you use like LODs in your like renders, or do you just high poly it?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess my approach is unique in that I'm not a Blender user. So obviously we have, it's different apps, so you sort of handle things differently. But no, I've always just high polyed everything because I mean, I don't know, I don't like if I'm building speed tree assets or I'm downloading stuff, like I don't want to decimate. And plus, as Sam pointed out, like at least for me, it's not really necessary. Like you load an asset in once and it's instanced once, and I can up that number to 1.5 mil, and I'm still moving around in real time. So it's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't really hit me using Octane Scatter in that way.
Because sorry, you keep going. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No. No, hit it.
How instancing sort of works is that there's this thing called at least in Blender, it's called the bounding volume hierarchy. And it's basically a series of bounding boxes that the ray intersects with in order to like sort of reach the plane that it like triangle that's actually trying to intersect with. So when you create a new instance, you aren't storing a unique copy of the mesh that is instanced or even the sort of bounding box construction around that allows the rays to go like reach this or interact with the scene a little bit more efficiently. You're just creating essentially a new, I guess the best way I can explain this is like you're creating a new bounding box inside which that tree is or whatever it is sort of held, and you're just treating that as the same thing as you would any other of the instance meshes in the scene.
I do understand it, but I just wonder because I do think Blender has like maybe not on the render itself, but there is like some kind of limitation. Same with like, I mean, I use personally the high poly meshes, but like when the terrain gets really large, for example, like there is a case to be made, I think, to use a low poly mesh. I'm talking about big terrains, like Cub said, like 15 kilometers deep.
Yeah, I know. There's more to it. There's stuff that I don't understand. I'm not a render engine guru in
It's interesting that I'm curious what the difference, like how Sam, you might know, like and not that you know Octane Scatter, but I mean, just scattering tools in general, do they differ or do they all use the same tech? Because I guess I just haven't run into any issues similar to like what you guys have been describing.
Yeah, so Blender starts to chug after a certain point. So there's definitely some stuff that's happening behind the scenes that's a little bit different. It
Is the
seems.
instancing being done via the GPU or the CPU, or is that irrelevant?
I don't think it's necessarily relevant, because that all happens sort of in the initializing phase. Once you construct the BVH, they're pretty much the same. I think in Blender in cycles that it's constructed on the CPU, but I'm honestly not sure. I haven't really looked into that. I
only ask because I know scatter for Octane is a GPU scatter.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it is. It is actually a CPU thing because I even realized, especially with these GeoNode things, like when you are like increasing the density. I remember like there's like a few settings that will really like freeze up in the viewport already, even if you're not viewing the scat or anything. Just like changing the scale is like something that will like really freeze up your Blender as you're working in it. So I think it is definitely like a CPU thing.
Yeah, but Aaron, to your question, like the algorithms that they're using behind the scenes, of course, implementation differences are a thing. But from my understanding, the algorithms for instancing in ray tracing renders are fairly similar.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess it's a pretty simple in, I guess, output. Like, I mean, you're just pumping clones. I imagine that there's only a few ways to sort of do that.
Yeah.
But to wrap it up a little bit for this one question, because I think getting a little too technical into Blender, but basically optimizing large scale environments, instance your meshes, of course, don't scatter like manually. I don't know even how you would do that, but yeah, make sure you instance your meshes. You can use LODs. I mean, I know there is a case to be made that it maybe isn't necessary, but I personally think that there is a limit to how many high poly meshes you can use in Blender before your viewport starts chugging it. I don't have any idea what the impact is on the render, but I know the viewport will start chugging even if you have bounding boxes on your meshes.
Well, that bounding box thing, I think that happens regardless of how, or that viewport chugging thing, I think that happens relatively regardless of how many polys each mesh has.
I would say like we should do a test on that. I should test it out because I don't know, Blender works in mysterious ways sometimes. Even if it shouldn't, sometimes I have a feeling it does do stuff.
I think it's something to do with like draw calls and such, because that's such a huge issue in like game design, but I don't know anything about that. Because like for me, it starts chugging at like 100,000 objects. Like that's when I start noticing it. It doesn't matter if those objects got 10 polys or like 10,000. Well, it does matter a little bit, but if
but what about like 10 polys versus 1.5 million? I think that's where the big changes. I don't know. Maybe it's actually like just the rendering itself, because it does take, of course, it into the rendering. I don't know. Maybe there's more noise or something. I don't know. Well,
I by default have the bounding boxes turned on in my 3D scene or in my viewport.
Yeah. So that's definitely, and like turning off the overlays, all that. So to summarize for Blender at least, because Octane sounds like it can handle it fine, but for Blender, instance your scatters, of course, like instance your assets, turn on bounding boxes, so in the viewport it's not like rendering out the whole object, it's just a bounding box. Turn off the overlay if you go into rendered mode. You can limit your instance number by merging meshes and having a larger mesh, like for grass, for instance, like you merge a bunch of grass models together into like a cluster and scatter that so it's less dense.
That one is really important.
Yeah, all these things will optimize your large scale environments. And not to mention is check your texture sizes and your materials, how complex they are. If you can make some changes there. Sometimes Gaia textures can be really heavy. So yeah, just check your texture sizes, check the complexity of your materials, and make changes there, and try to lower it all down a bit for quicker results.
I'm gonna close my window because there's some activity happening outside. I'll be right back.
All right.
If I were to just give my TLDR, like I know Octane comes at it from a different angle, but I mean, buy a 4090. Just kidding. I think VRAM managing is so important, and that just comes down to, I guess, your geo size and textures, like the trees. Like if I'm coming from Speed Tree, 2.5 mil poly is sort of like my target, like on the higher end. Just because if you're wanting a variety of trees and you got, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 10 of them at that size, you can eat through your VRAM pretty quick. So just trying to manage it. It is, as you guys were saying, it is very much an asset texture thing, which is going to choke you, as well as atmosphere settings. Like I feel like sometimes there is like if you've got the wrong atmospheric settings in your scene and you're on, your render's going to feel like a slideshow. And you could get, at least an Octane, a near identical result that's running 10 times faster. So it's just making sure you have right settings for Atmos, which you can learn Blender-wise from you guys, and from Octane. I don't know if that. I mean, I've got my own system, but I don't know. That's not public, and I don't know any toots. But like, it's you can sort of fool around, and you can get to that result pretty quick. Oh, you can DM me, and I can just tell you my settings. That's fine. So outside of that sort of stuff,
you're gonna have thousands of people.
What was that?
You're gonna have thousands of people DMing you now.
That's all right. I'll just do a copy paste. I think as well, in terms of optimizing, what was I going to say? If you're doing like super large scale, I guess I don't separate assets, but Martin, you stole my point of clumping assets together. But I think that there's an artistic angle to that, in that, and I've done this in the past and undone this in the past, where you can overemphasize scale to fill in scattering gaps, which in turn makes the scene look more filled, but you are also breaking scale. So it's like, don't don't do any trickery like that to fill in some density, like increasing scale to fill gaps, because like if it's noticeable, obviously, like rocks in the distance and stuff, because even though it's like a subconscious eye break where something will look off, and it tends to be because you've overcompensated for trying to fill in gaps. I don't know if anyone else can relate to that, but I know I
Yeah,
definitely have done
absolutely.
that.
I totally did that. I
Yeah,
think I
Yeah,
but
so
sometimes still do that.
it's
yeah,
definitely
so that,
something
I
like
mean,
you can adjust scale, but you have to do it very minimally. Like you can. I used to
super
fill
minimally.
in the density a bit for the distance. For example, like increase the scale of the grass among the trees. I mean,
Yes.
Geoscatter has
Yeah,
settings like
where you're not
that.
going to notice, but it's just noise
Yeah,
at that point, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah. Um, I guess
but
try to
yeah,
do as many things through textures as possible, but textures can only carry you so far. Like you do need geoscatter.
realistically,
Um,
it's also
yeah,
environment art is just kind of an expensive one. It's sad, but if you have a very low end computer, it's going to be tougher to
tough.
do environment.
Yeah,
And
it's
like
tough.
I used to have a pretty shitty PC and I used to have a 1060 and I would make environments and I would be limited to what I could do. I would
Yeah,
try my best so hard to make it realistic, but there was just limitations and I just did what I could with what my machine at the time, and then as I progressed, I eventually decided that I love doing this, so I decided to put money towards it and buy better buy a better PC, and that's continued over my career now. Where once I started making money with it, I could afford even better PC, and then
yeah, and
you're
that's the
in.
way to
Yeah.
do it. Like you can start small. There's no rules that you can't, but it is like to do the big daddy stuff. Like you just need the grunt, you need the force. But I think like um, what was I going to say? It's very easy to cross-check as something that is breaking your scene in terms of optimization, in that you just turn everything off, so your viewport's running great, and you just one by one everything, and then you can pretty quickly find the asset or the element or the scatter or something that is the
So
culprit,
in
and
Blender
That's a
there
then
really
is
you
good
have
a
technique.
in Blender there is actually a system or an add-on for that. I mean, I'll plug it. I'm not sponsored, but it really saves you time because you can run a like check on your scene and it will give you all the size of your materials, and you'll sometimes be surprised how an asset that you've brought in, like a grass asset, has a material that takes 1 gigabyte of VRAM because all these textures haven't been
well, that's the thing.
like
I on,
optimized.
I only use 1K textures, 2K textures maybe. Like unless
Yeah.
it's an asset that's close, like 512 even. Like you don't need anything for and that's sort of where a lot of that VRAM goes. Like when you bring in
Yeah.
a
Yeah,
max tree asset, like the textures are 4K, 8K, and you don't even know.
yeah,
Yeah,
and to put that into perspective, like a 1K texture is 1/64th the memory footprint of a 8K texture.
Okay, so
Wow.
wait.
So like,
New
imagine that.
new TLDR is number one, instance your assets. Number two, make sure you could try LODs. You could try it, but it's not 100% proven. Number three, manage your materials. And number four, check your texture sizes. It's not always necessary to get 4K, 8K textures. 2K, 1K, or even 512, as Aaron says, is okay for distant assets.
If you
Yeah,
want your mind blown,
and number five,
you
wait,
can look at
clumping
babies.
clumping materials together. Okay, we should definitely go on to the next point though, because
Yeah.
this one will take a little, maybe less time because it's, I guess, yeah, interesting. What are your strategies for building realistic vegetation systems, especially in scattering large scenes? And I'll just say right away, like, it's just layers. I found that, adding layers to, like, a lot of people will scatter just trees and say this is a forest, and then they say, why is my render not looking realistic? And then you just have to think to yourself, like, okay, even from a distance, like what can I see when I look at a forest? Like, is it just trees, or is there dead trees in there? Is there patches of grass and meadows? Is there like debris, whatever? It's still important, even if it's at a distance. You don't just scatter only trees. I don't know what the group has to say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, think about it in terms of layers is the best way to go about it. And I think the two things that go through my head when developing vegetation systems is layers, but also like organic shapes. And you can get organic shapes for scattering really, really easily in Blender by using a noise texture in geometry nodes. So instead of scattering, like, let's just say we want like a round clump of grass. When I first started 3D, I would have just like weight painted a circle and then had the grass in there, and it would have all been the same size, whatever. But now I'll use a noise texture so that in the middle of the clump, the grass is kind of taller and it's a little less dense. And then as it goes out, it's kind of has arms that stretch out and the grass gets a little smaller and a little less dense, sorry, more dense in the center. So you get these like organic bubbles of shapes and scattering. And then you layer on different types of grass within that system, and they're all kind of interacting with each other within these bubbles of organic scattering, and things just look really, really beautiful.
Yeah, I would say that that's like, again, a layer thing. It's just layering detail, and you can do that through, well, layers of different assets, but at the same time, inside of those assets that are being scattered, add layers of, interest with noise, to, do the density, but also scale. You can change so many of these settings with just layers, in a sense. I don't know, Aaron is probably doing a very similar thing with like the noise patterns to like scatter.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably one of the hardest questions to answer correctly in a this is how you do it, because it's, for me, at least for me, this was one of those practice, okay, and then practice more. Oh, okay, practice it again. Like, you just have to, like, this is one of, like, you just have to go, like, you, like, reference copying over and over and over and over and over again. And it's one of those, you train your eye as opposed to, how to click things. Like, in terms of mechanically, like, yeah, you can export your masks from Gaia or World Creator with flows, and but you don't want them to necessarily follow those flows exactly, because then it's going to look pretty robotic. So you want to break them up, but then you want noise patterns within those masks to break up, like, the foliage itself, like from dead to alive. But then you want underlying growth. So it's such a complex answer. But I guess it's not like it. I'm sort of painting it to be overwhelming. It's not necessarily overwhelming. It's just one of those practice things where find a photo where it has a somewhat simple structure in terms of foliage formations, and just mimic it and work out how to copy that, and then go a bit bigger, then go a bit bigger, then go a bit bigger. And at least that's what I did, and still do, because what works at a macro scale is still applicable at the large scale. Because it exists within that large scale. And so if you train your eye small and make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, I think conceptually then it's easier to follow, instead of just starting at a big environment and feeling lost in the source because you don't really know how it works at a small level. So I guess that's sort of the way I would answer it. But yeah.
That's actually really solid. Like,
it's more of a
actually, I
theory
learned something
answer
there.
than a technical answer.
Yeah, but that's what it is at the end of the day. It is actually technical, depends on what tools you're using, right? Like, I use Geoscatter, but Cove uses his own scattering systems, and you use Octane. Everybody uses their own technical things, but what matters here is that, well, for one, you should kind of know what you're using, because otherwise, if you're still learning how to use it, then that's also going to be tough. But as you said, it's more of a theory, just making sure that you like practice that theory, and it's going to take time, really. The easy answer is just layers, but how you apply those layers and where, that's all like something you have to learn.
Well, yeah, it's almost like a language on its own. Like, I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess you learn to play guitar, you start off by strumming each chord individually. Like, it's a slow start. That's why I guess I started small, start with a really macro scene, and you grow out, because really then cool, it gives you the understanding.
Because I just started big. I did a few like smaller scale scenes, but I never really did macro, and actually I'm finding myself going closer now and trying to do macro scenes. And it actually kind of works too, because I understand that layer theory in a sense, and I understand my tools very well. So it is easier to learn, but it's definitely different. So it's interesting to hear from you that you did macro and then slowly scaled up.
Yeah,
I guess I do the opposite.
Yeah, because I guess I just figured everything that's macro would exist in anything that's big. So, and if you want scale to work in scenes, you need the small stuff to work. And so I guess by knowing what exists on that mountain, if there's a mountain slope 7.5 kilometers away in my scene, I need to know structurally that foliage system, even though it's like a fifth of my image. Like, I still would want that element in the distance to be as convincing as the stuff up close. And so I guess that's why I do a lot of macro stuff.
I guess that speaks volumes to why your work is so good. Like, it speaks volumes to like why your work is probably more realistic than any of us, because you just, like, as you said, like, you're focusing even on the macros when it is a big scene, when I think maybe more environment artists who do big scenes are just focused on what is visible from this distance rather than like understanding basically the depth behind it all. But that's a really good tip. Yeah.
The practice that Aaron mentions of kind of building up your foliage system is something that nowadays I don't really do foliage stuff because I find it a little bit more tedious than the other bits of environment art, but I definitely took a page out of his book. I never really went to like micro or whatever you called it, macro. I'm going to call it micro because it's easier for my dumbass brain. The micro to the large scale wide shots, right? I just never had an interest in doing stuff at a smaller scale, but definitely approaching it from like creating a realistic ecosystem that felt plausible that I could walk through and such, and then applying that once I've created that little ecosystem in a separate project onto a larger terrain. That's been the most successful thing that I've done.
Yeah, that works too.
Yeah,
I mean, that's sort of how I sort of, I remember speaking to you about that ages ago. That's sort of how you get your grass. I mean, and let's say your little ecosystem has, a ground and grass and bushes. Like, some of that might not even be readable at the scale, whatever your scene is at, but at least you've built your assets structured and anchored around something that is real world values and scale. So it's sort of like it keeps you tethered to those truth elements.
And I've always thought of foliage as gradients, that it's if you have sort of a forest edge, there's kind of a gradient from whatever is outside of the forest, which might be grass or just small bushes and whatever, to the actual foresty bits. It's not a harsh cutoff. There's different the edge of the forest is a completely different ecosystem than the center of the forest. Like the structure of the trees, even if they're in the same species, is different, right? There's just kind of
it goes to that like tapering. I think we talked about this in our first time we ever talked. It was like the edges of forests. You have to like taper them off a little bit using smaller assets. And
that's honestly like myself. I of course like to build my own tools, and like I'm going to preface this by saying like I'm actually not that great at foliage scattering. At least not anymore. I don't think I was ever very good, but I definitely had the most success not thinking about it in necessarily a layers way, but kind of considering each species' sort of place in those little gradients, right? So it'd be like a color ramp, but for foliage.
Yeah. No, I remember doing that as well. You can, I don't know, you can set it up in GeoNodes, like having like a weight paint, and then you can have certain assets at certain ranges of the weight paint, actually.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
That's kind of the system that I built a lot of my foliage scattering stuff around.
But this is another testament to like, again, the layers. You have a layer for like the big canopy, and then the edges of the canopy, like, and then the grasses that come in. It's all like layers of detail. So I guess we've discussed this very deeply as well. Just a lot of theory. But I think what's very important is that don't do work, from within your mind. Don't start thinking, oh, I need a forest. Well, what is a forest? Scatter trees. That's it. Just look at real life, references, and just as Aaron mentioned too, like, try to do that reference matching. Just look at a real life image and just try to get as close as possible to that real life image. And you'll learn that there's a lot more work than just what you think a forest is, for example, like, or what a field is. There's a lot more to it if you actually try to reference match, and you'll come to.
And just to add to that,
layers.
once you get going, it's also a lot easier than you think it might be. But you just sort of because when it starts clicking, you start registering all those little bits that make up a believable flow or whatever, and then you've got your theory. So you just implement that forever. So but it's only once you get started, it becomes easier naturally, like any sort of practice. But yeah.
No, it's not like you have to like keep practicing, like the reference matching for the rest of your career. I mean, of course, keep practicing, but you slowly start building habits that are good. But yeah, just I think that concludes it pretty well. So we'll go to atmosphere. What are your tips for lighting and atmosphere, particularly in dramatic or challenging settings, high altitude mountains, and dark scenarios? This can be a question for Sam, because Sam is an atmosphere person, but I am gonna beg him to keep it simple because you can go into depth on this stuff.
My answer. I mean, I just said my answer. Hope and pray. I think Aaron probably has the best grasp of this when it comes to creating, because atmosphere is very intertwined with scale and such. I'm a nerd for like clouds and such, so I do like dramatic lightings. Like I made the little rings, like ring eclipse shot, which I was pretty fond of. That's just execution on an interesting idea. I don't think that's necessarily a display of skill or technique. For me, it's just I try to include elements in my atmospheres that I find interesting, and usually those elements are clouds and such. And because I like showing off the CG aspect of it, like the 3D aspect, I like to put those clouds in a position that it might be challenging to replicate with more quote unquote traditional, 3D methods, like using a plane for clouds or something. So, because, by the way, just context for viewers who might not be familiar with my work, I use VDBs for clouds a lot. VDBs are like 3D volumetric textures, so stuff that you might use for like smoke simulations and whatnot. So it's just kind of flexing the versatility of those VDBs in ways that you might not usually see from more like conventional methods to do clouds and such. But
it's very heavy, right? Like that's definitely a big thing. Like with atmosphere in general, it's a tough one because there's a lot of ways you can do it, and I think there's the really realistic way, which you're an expert in, where you have real values that are like really matching the look.
I think Aaron is honestly the expert in creating realism through atmosphere. I think
for his values for the actual atmosphere, like in the world.
Yeah.
That's true. Like he has the beautiful like color fall offs and everything, like the bluish hue and stuff's always perfect. I've recently been developing my own atmosphere system trying to get that look. But Aaron has already said he doesn't know how to explain it that well. He can just give you values if you DM him.
If you DM me, I'll just give you I'll literally just copy paste what my setup. But it's just I think, but it's tough because like if you put my setup into incorrect lighting values, it's not going to look right. So that's the tough thing, because you can't just bring in an HDRI because HDRIs are all balanced differently. So in a weird way, in an annoying way, it just comes back to theory again and training your eye. And I mean, I talk about this with Sam all the time. Like I'm such a in so many times, I guess I get asked to do training in a course and how do I build things and stuff like that. And I've never known how to do it because it's a slight divergent from the question, but it does answer the question in that a lot of the time it comes back to just eye training. And so whether it's atmosphere, lighting, like if you just chuck in your daylight rig and an HDRI, you go, why does this look shit? Like what? Or bad. I don't know if you can swear. Why does this look crap? Like I don't know why. And then you put in an HDRI because that's what everyone tells you to do, and it still looks bad. And you just don't fully understand. But it just comes back to eye training and practice. So I'm happy to give my Atmos values and a basic setup, like from a daylight rig for Cinema 4D and Octane. That is, like I'll make a little project and I can just Dropbox you the project with the daylight rig setup in there. That does work, and then you can chuck HDRIs into that, and if it breaks, then adjust the HDRI accordingly to bring it back down or whatever.
Yeah,
But
I
it's
definitely
tricky.
agree with the
It's
fact
tricky
that
to answer.
like it's tricky because, as you said, it's you have to set up a system that is like good for your lighting. I personally built a system that is also like very much like really I like looked at the reference of like a daylight scene in these mountains in this like altitude range and how the blue kind of like the blue hue is in a different distance and how the shadows like become more darker and that kind of stuff and how the haze kind of just breaks up shape a little bit sometimes. But like again, if I plug in an overcast HDRI instead of like the very midday blue sky HDRI, then it doesn't work because all of a sudden my atmosphere is very blue, but the overcast lighting is very white and
Yeah,
flat. So you have
I
to
ran
change
into
the
that.
values. Yeah.
So that was an issue I was running into because I mean, I wanted my approach to be I can throw any lighting setup into my Atmos setup and all of them work because I've set up an atmosphere system that's just universal. So I was running into what you were running into for so long, where it worked for one setup, and then if a client or if I just wanted to play with something different, you'd need to change the atmosphere, which I thought the Earth doesn't do that. So how do I, like the Earth doesn't behave that way? I need to have a better system. So
Well,
again, yeah.
it kind of does because different humidity levels and such.
Sorry, yeah. I'm just more
Yeah.
meaning like if it's
No, I
you
totally
know
get you.
if it's daytime and then 30 minutes later it's raining, the atmosphere is not going through this huge. It's not a bunch of sliders that are moving around in huge degrees. It's sort of just the same.
I definitely think
Interestingly enough,
HDRIs. Oh, sorry.
Interestingly enough, I do believe there is like a universal solution to this. It's just kind of wildly impractical for most people. Like we have a friend, his name is Zircon45. Also has a YouTube channel. Shout out. He spent a lot of time creating like a very realistic atmosphere system that essentially covers like an entire planet, and it actually works really well for a lot of scenes. Um, but definitely, I think there's a little bit like there's also the component of that where it's just kind of opaque for anyone who doesn't know precisely what's going on.
I think it's difficult because there's so much lighting differences. Like when you have HDRIs, as Aaron already pointed out, HDRIs are so different. Like the ones that from exterior compared to the ones from Pure Skies compared to the ones from the HDRI, like the free ones you can get for Blender, like they're all so extremely different when it comes to their color output. Like some have very blue tones and others have very just flat white tones, even though they're
that's what it's hard to know, because if you don't catch that an HDRI is casting warm and then all your textures are looking warm, and so you hue shift them greener, and then you change the lighting, and you're like, why is everything fluoro? And it's because you've overcorrected just because your HDRI setup. So that I normally set up every single one in my scenes with a sunlight directly top down 90 degrees, middle of the day. Every single scene, no matter the lighting setup that the scene will be, I always set it up with that, with a daylight rig that I know the color temperature of. And so I'm not overcorrecting anything when I'm setting everything up. And then I build my scene. But I would never set up a scene with an HDRI, just because it's too variable.
Oh, you set up your scene with just like a sun lamp. That's
sun lamp directly top down. Well, for me, it's a daylight rig, so it's got the blue sky in it. But yeah, it's essentially just a top down light. Yeah.
The sky texture, yeah. I mean, I find myself really only using the sky texture. I don't really use HDRIs, and I haven't really had an issue with that. I just sky texture and then a big ass cube with a atmosphere shader on it, and I bring a gradient on the top of the cube so that the atmosphere kind of falls off towards the sky. And if I'm feeling fancy, I put like a cube with what's the word for when towards the ground it gets a little lighter? What's that called? Yeah, like a haze. Yeah, if you can do that too with a gradient, so like towards the ground it's a little bit brighter. It's hard to show that without a photo, but maybe you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's just
but yeah, that's basically all I do, and I don't know if I'm limiting myself by not making it more complex, but it seems like a big cube with.
it shouldn't be complex. That's sort of I was trying to overcome. So the atmosphere I have now works with anything, any lighting system, any HDRI. It just worked. But before I had this, it worked, but I had to constantly change it. It was way too complex, and I'm like, this isn't. I mean, I like things simple, and this isn't it.
Yeah.
So I think simple. If you can, the simpler you can make it work, like hell yeah, that's where it's at.
Thank you for saying that, Aaron. That is one of the core principles of my 3D journey, going from complexity to simplicity.
Yeah.
Well, because some people can flex on the complexity, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a good quote I like that simple does not mean easy. Like those are two different things. Like a simple
I think
solution for me is always, if you can get it looking good, it usually works a little bit better than trying to like overfit certain values.
right.
Try to calibrate
Well,
a
that's
million different
I think
variables.
basic would mean easy, but simple. You're right. Simple can be actually quite a long journey to get to.
Yeah.
Okay, so TLDR, principal volume, use that. No, nothing. And then just DM Aaron for values. Just make sure you spam him. He'll
Well,
give you
yeah,
the
I am
answers.
curious. Carv, do you remember when you did that? The city on a hill.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. Did I give you my value? I'm curious if my values translate to Blender.
They didn't really translate, but
Okay.
yeah, they didn't really translate. But I think what I really did was the anisotropy is pretty important. So that was something where I was looking at you made like a kind of like a demo scene of what I was practicing, and you gave me a value, but it didn't translate, so I just kind of like found it. But really, for people that are using Blender, if you're just using a principled volume on a cube, the anisotropy that I go with for almost everything is like a 0.6.
Yeah.
And it works really well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in Octane, it's phase. It's the same thing. But yeah, I'm curious, Sambo, what do you do? I do 0.6 to 0.8. But what do you do like for an Atmos thing?
I usually have the Rayleigh scattering component, which is like the blue, right?
Yeah.
And then I have a separate thing for the haze. And for the Rayleigh scattering, I use usually between 0 and 0.3.
Yeah.
And then for the haze, the anisotropy is higher, so it's more forward scattering. And
wait, what are these values you're talking about?
What do you mean? Oh,
I
the
don't.
anisotropy?
No. What is the Rayleigh and stuff like that? I've never heard of that.
The Rayleigh scattering. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Isn't it like the new scattering system from like the Blender 4.3 and up? Yeah, like the Rayleigh on the volume scatter.
It's the type of scattering that it's the type of scattering that gives you the blue in the sky.
Is there a new scattering system in Blender I don't know about?
Yeah, volume scatter. If you use volume scatter, they have like settings now. Like
there are a couple new phase functions.
Oh, I need to check this out.
It used to be just Henye-Greenstein, which is kind of the most ubiquitous one. There's just a simple anisotropy slider. Now there's Rayleigh, Drain, and Me, and then there's another like Drain.
But I have a question. This would but you say Rayleigh. I mean, I use it in my atmosphere setup, but I still have to add blue hues in like my absorption and in my scattering to like get a bluish look in the distance. Rayleigh doesn't just give me a blue look if I have a white light.
There's also another thing I do with atmosphere is I turn the volume bounces like all the way up.
Oh, but that's gonna destroy render times.
No, not really, because it's a fairly thin atmosphere. Is fairly thin, so you're only getting a couple different bounces. It's only for dense clouds that it really has any effect.
I feel like it's gonna give like not necessarily make your render times longer, but introduce a lot of noise. Because I mean, atmosphere
it does introduce a bit of noise.
So that will then increase your render times.
I don't think it's as much as you might think, though.
I don't know. I do animation work mostly, so then it's like I use for the Rocky Mountains one. I use like an actual volumetric setup, which normally I use emission based because it's just quick. But this time I noticed the noise is tough.
There's going to be noise if you're using a volume scattering atmosphere, and the amount of like the differential between the like basic volumetric scattering with nothing else and volume scattering the multi-scatter, which is multiple bounces, hasn't been devastating for me. There is a little bit more, but it's always been manageable for me.
All right, well,
I think
I'll
it's
try it out
best
then for
used
next
if
time.
you are concerned about it as like a reference, because it will immediately look a lot better, because of course light can bounce multiple times within a volume.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out because I mean I know for my
Yeah.
project I had some clouds in there too, so I added like 3 bounces, not that many, and I was like already like looking at the noise like oof, this is tough, but it is worth it though. Like the actual volumetric atmosphere, it looks a lot
Yeah.
better in the
I
distance.
mean, if the render times do become concerning, the thing to do there is just use that as sort of a ground truth render and then shift your atmosphere to look a little bit more like that.
Okay, so this is a tough question to answer fully, but all we can say is train your eye, try to keep it simple, and yeah, there's not much to it other than it's not really a one and done answer here. It is a you have to adjust for your lighting setup and yeah, just train your eye for whatever type of atmosphere you're trying to achieve. Dan, we are really not helping these people.
Yeah, good
Well,
luck.
it's helpful in that a lot of these answers, at least so far, have been theory-based answers. So it's not necessarily a classic. You just click that thing and make sure you have that slider set to 97. Like it's such a you need to learn what lighting is. Like you need to learn how lighting reacts, and if you don't, like your scenes won't look good, and if you do, your scenes will look amazing. So it's tough that it's not traditional 3D work in that, you know, you can do a basic tutorial and it all works out. Like you do need to learn theory, in my opinion, to do this sort of stuff.
Yeah, it goes back to like when I see a lot of beginner people like asking why their renders aren't looking good, and I ask they post their render, which you know, okay, it's like a beginner environment, and then I ask, okay, well, what's your reference? And a lot of times either they don't have a specific reference or they haven't even looked at reference that much. They've just kind of gone, and that's where it is. It's like again, just you know, train your eye, look at real, like if you're going for an environment that is supposed to be realistic, then yeah, study all the images, you know, of that environment,
Totally.
the real environment out there, and check all those values, especially those color values. Because at the end of the day, like even though it is a 3D program, what we're doing is creating like an image, right? So almost as if you're painting, what like color, you know, you would use for this, you know, for the atmosphere of what we're painting in. In 3D, it's a bit different of how you get there. There's all kinds of ways of how you can get certain colors, but yeah, just at the end of the day, that color is the color that you need for that specific look.
Dude,
so yeah, train your eye.
On that asking questions note, I'm like so self-aware that I'm super annoying to get answers from, because I usually ask way more questions and try to like force you to create like a very specific question instead of answering outright. But yeah, it's about, my goal there is to kind of force people to think a little bit more about what exactly they want, and then they're a bit closer to finding out the right solution on their own.
Like when
That's
a
how I like
person
to
asks you a
troubleshoot.
question, right? Like on the Discord or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do a similar thing. Not often when people ask me for feedback, I first ask them, okay, what's your reference? Because I can't give you any feedback if I don't know what you're trying to make.
Yeah.
Well,
it's like also like I produced a planet course, or I am producing a planet course, and people come into the Discord server with like tech support questions, and usually it's pretty simple stuff that I can identify like pretty quickly, but there's a lot of skill and utility to, like, for instance, like all of these questions have usually been answered in the video, so there's not necessarily a point to me repeating them. The point that I see is leading people through that troubleshooting process. That way they actually learn something, as opposed to just putting a patch on the issue.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's tough for a lot of beginners. It's a lot of beginners have a tough time to understand that.
Yeah, but all they really need usually is someone to guide them through that and force I don't want to say force because that sounds mean, but like sort of encourage them to investigate this a little bit more thoroughly. Because a lot of people are like really close to having the solution to an issue. All they need is a little bit of guidance, and then they can figure it out on their own without having to be told. And I think that's quite helpful as opposed to just saying, "Hey, you forgot to click this button." Although sometimes that is, of course, the better way to go.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there's technical things, but
Yeah.
okay.
Sorry
Next
for being a
question.
soft
Next
topic.
question. So this question, I think I want to maybe skip to like some other questions, and then we can get back to the technical ones because we've been
I
very
think
like
so. That
because right now I'll
Yeah.
be honest for everybody watching, the questions again, like how do you approach creating a believable ground surface, it's going to be very similar to when we were talking about realistic vegetation systems. It's study your reference, try to do reference matching. It's a great exercise, especially for like smaller scale scenes. It's very doable. And then like, yeah, it's layers, like how do I get a realistic foreground? It's, well, okay, look at what's there on your image and then add those layers of detail. It's pretty similar to a large scale. If you want to have realism, it's mostly just training your eye and doing that reference matching practice that Aaron has suggested. So we can get into that maybe in more detail if we have more time, but right now I want to go into some interesting resource questions because I like these ones as well. So for resources, the number one question here is, what's your approach to gathering references and inspiration for a project? Well, I think for me specifically, reference comes when I've not started a project yet. I just love to just look at images of like certain terrains or something. I like watching documentaries, I'm watching movies or something. It just kind of comes and I'm just like seeing an image that I really like, and I get interested and I do research and I build my reference and inspiration from that. I don't know how you guys gather references and inspiration for a project yourself.
I think it's very much the same for me. I don't have a very organized way of creating references. I think something that is important to note is that I do a lot for like larger projects. Like I'm working on a Mars little short film. One of the things that I did there when building my reference board was try to create find individual references for the components of other references. So if I had like some sort of interaction with like maybe like a Mars rock and then the Martian sand that I wanted to make sure I was paying attention to, I would try to source a reference that really highlighted that. It's about, in my estimation, it's about creating like sort of a complete map of what you want to do mentally. Um, I hope that makes sense.
I think it's similar for me, right? Like you have an image, and then like there's a rock flow on this mountain, and I'll get like some images of like rock flow in the Rocky Mountains or something, and then I get that as an extra reference for maybe more detail. Aaron, you're about to say something.
No, I was that were the birds. I'm sitting outside at the moment, and yeah, it's 1 a.m. So I think it was some guys having some fun. Now, for me, I mean, I started off with photos, but I slowly got more aggravated by just how photos are so graded on a lot of these sites, and it gives such a false impression of what the values actually are. So if you're copying the values in a photo and that photo is being graded even a tiny bit, your IPR or what's in your IPR is not going to look correct if you're matching graded photos values, because then you're getting a graded image in your IPR that's not graded. So if that makes sense. So I tend to, what I do, at least what I have found myself doing a lot more recently, is YouTube, just finding walking videos. So if I am doing, let's say I'm doing a mountain scene, I just try to find some dude filming himself, like POV walking through the mountains, and as neutral and flat looking as possible. And I prefer getting screenshots from something like that, even though it's not the highest quality or 4K and there's a bit of whatever. I find that to be way more helpful than anything professional. Or I go to Getty or iStock, and get either drone footage or as whatever I can find that's not graded or as flat as possible. That's shot by Ben on his August holiday in Canada. Something random. I find that to be far more helpful than
They're like for that ungraded, just like raw images, basically that somebody took on a hike. A lot of people upload their images to like Google Maps, and if I've been like going through the
That's huge.
Rockies,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
just
that's
clicking
huge.
like
That's really
random
helpful as well,
mountains, and then you'll just
especially
find
when
like
they're panos.
yeah, they're just like random images somebody just decided to take, and they were like, I don't know, they just uploaded it, and they're normally not professional photographers, and that means
Or
that
even
you
the
get the
Google
raw
Maps car
values.
as well, I find really
Mm-hmm.
helpful.
Yeah.
So like, just like dropping your little yellow guy onto roads, whatever biome you're going in, and just looking at trees from the front and the back and how it's lit and moving around. And that can give you a better idea than, going to Unsplash or whatever and getting some high res stuff that's contrasted to the bilio. And yeah, so Google's huge. And then, YouTube
Yeah,
flat.
I've been preaching about that for a while, that Google Earth is like the most fun way to get references.
Huge.
It's
Yeah,
just
it's
so
so
great
good.
to explore an area and see everything from different angles.
Well,
And then
the different angles thing is massive.
yeah, you can pick your own shot, you can pick your own composition. On the panoramics or from the street view. It's just such a great tool. Like that's what I use for basically every project. I use Google Earth.
It also helps, let's say you're building something from a region and you find that area, like what Cub was saying, and you then get out your ruler in Google Earth and you can measure your distance. So now you know your actual scene scale.
That's huge.
And so you're getting so much free resource just from that.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
even
totally.
speaking from like industry experience, like again, it's kind of like about that like real life stuff. Like, so we're already talking about Google Earth and getting distance measures. A lot of movies also just take like the scans, like, or like the height maps from real mountain areas and then process them for higher detail, of course.
Yep.
That's another thing. So yeah, reference, inspiration, TLDR. I would say use Google Earth and just go through it, man.
I like how the option to go outside and take our own photos has not even been covered.
I mean, like when I was in Korea, I was surrounded by buildings. When I'm in the Netherlands, it's all flat. There's no interesting mountains here whatsoever. So
Yeah.
it's a tough one for me. But
to be
It's
fair,
easier.
for this, sorry, go.
I was just gonna say it's easier, at least from my perspective, to do that for individual assets. Like if I'm trying to make or get a plant or something made, like yeah, of course it's gonna be easier probably to find good references for that because I can have that control. But like the large scenic landscapes, like it's not necessarily trivial to get a good suite of references from them.
None of these
Especially
guys are going to go outside anyway, so.
no, I don't go outside.
Stay
The outside
inside.
scares me. It's dangerous outside. Like
I
what the
can't
hell?
even walk
It is.
anymore.
I don't know, man.
Ever since I was like 8, I always had said outside is just the journey to get back inside. So it's
Exactly. What's the point? I don't need the outside.
It's the way it goes. But now for the second part of that question with the inspiration, like when I do my macro stuff, I'm pretty much always doing it off what I like shoot on a walk with my camera. So like I'm taking my son for a little stroll. I'll see a cool little creek bed. I'll 360 it with my phone, and then I'll dissect an element from that, and then that's what I'll do for the afternoon. Spend a few hours on just one, like moss on a rock, and then delete the project and call it a day. But that's the practice. So the inspiration is what I do shoot myself, but reference, Google Earth and YouTube.
Okay, yeah, no, that's really something for like smaller scale stuff. Even plants, as Sam had said, I take pictures myself in the forest or something, because seeing it in real life and then taking a picture, I don't know, it helps, especially with macro stuff.
Because then it's in your mind as well, it's not just in the camera.
Yeah, exactly. For inspiration, I think it's fine to just look at artwork, paintings, movies, all the graded stuff. That's cool. For reference, it's really, I think, important that you also get the real world values. So just, go with Google Earth. It's a very easy, free resource.
For me, inspiration. Sorry, you guys all had much better answers than me for the references, but for me, inspiration is I like to take inspiration like a bit more conceptually and try to fit it together like a puzzle piece and see if I can produce something unique.
So you have like an idea of a concept, and
Yeah.
you get, I get, because your
Like, I
scenes
mean-
are also like massive. So like for a planetary scale, with like a ring around it. It's hard to find it in a it's hard to find like inspiration out in the wild for that kind of stuff. So it's a lot more conceptual.
That's why I was initially drawn to sci-fi stuff, because the artwork is so conceptual, right? Like you're imagining places that have never been seen, and you're trying to think about what would happen if there's planets like ordered in this certain way. And I think that's a obviously I also take inspiration from regular pictures and such, but if I had to like define my best projects, it would be that sort of conceptual mishmash that eventually makes its way onto the digital canvas.
That's very interesting, like a
That's
conceptual inspiration. I definitely have ideas, but that normally sparks from an image. So I see an image and then I have an idea for a short film I want to do. It's not necessarily that I have the idea before I see the image. I'm definitely more like it's like a trigger I need to hit before I get that conceptual part.
The joy of art for me comes from discovery, and from, if you think about it kind of from that motivation, it makes a little bit more sense why I might not get as much sort of inspiration from photos or other stuff that people have already done, although of course that still happens. But I like playing with ideas. I think that's the most rewarding for me.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Definitely,
I mean, playing with
discovery
ideas
has shaped my artistic journey probably more than anything else.
If Sam's word that he would describe like his motivator is discovery, curious, what would you guys say is your 1 word, 2 word, 3 word snapshot that sort of gets your juices flowing? Yeah. For me, it would be problem solving. That's sort of what I've always like. I would walk out into the garden, find a plant that there is a model for online, download the model, and then shade it as closely as I can to the thing in my garden, and just keep doing trips in and out of the house and taking photos and whatever until I've matched it, and I'm like, cool, problem solved. And then that sort of just expanded bigger and bigger and bigger.
My inspiration comes from learning new things. So like I don't know, like the trebuchet, like that was the trigger for Rise and Fall. I don't know why. I was just messing around one day, just making a trebuchet in Blender. It looked really dumb, but I found out a way of launching a projectile with like a rope that actually was like simulated. So I was like, whoa, that's cool. And then I modeled an actual trebuchet around it, and then shot a projectile. I was like, whoa, this looks kind of sick. This requires a scene, you know, like this can't just be me making a trebuchet. That's boring. This has to be in a castle. And the castle needs to have a whole scene around it too.
If you found yourself going for a string of time without learning something, would you find yourself being less motivated?
Absolutely. I have had times where, so like before that trebuchet, I was really kind of, I had a full-time job, so I was, fine financially, but I was getting really bored with environment art. I was like, I cannot do the same old landscape shots that just are landscapes and that's it. I was getting really bored with it, and I was totally out of any motivation or inspiration. And then, I don't know, randomly I was just messing around with Blender because I have nothing else to do. I don't go outside. And I made a trebuchet, and that spiraled for like a bunch of months into like a big project. Yeah. So for me, learning, I would say learning is like the main thing. Just learning a new thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think for me, mine is just being so motivated and inspired about a world, like world building. It's just so cool to me. And I get so inspired
from
by
like a storytelling angle.
I guess maybe from like a storytelling angle, but the reason why I got into 3D was because when I would watch movies, I was just so like, God, I want to be able to create like a world like this so badly. And then I found Ian Hubert, and he has like the most world built, just such a thick vibe is happening within his world. So I think for me, it's like I go through ArtStation, I go through a site called Shot Deck, and it basically is just like all the best stills from every movie that's ever created, and it organizes it for you, and you can sort by like genre and color and location and all this type of stuff. And just like feeling those worlds is so cool. And I feel like that doesn't always translate to my work because things take so much time, but I have so many ideas for basically just like deeply world built areas. Maybe I'll eventually make something that's, reflects my inspiration in that way. But
You did that somewhat with the course you did for All Mates. Forgot the name, but like
yeah,
you
CG
built.
Boost. Yeah.
Yeah. You did that.
Yeah, that was a pretty. Yeah, I thought a lot about that world with the art and the colors and such. And I think the project that I'm working on right now has a lot of lore behind it too. But yeah, I think just like being so inspired by someone's story that they've told in the world that exists there.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I'm
that's
very
dope.
like getting there a similar way. Like it was like I was very bored, as I said, with like what I was doing, and then like recently I did that horse model, and I was like, oh, having a lot of fun with it, and all of a sudden that evening it just spawned like motivation, inspiration, whatever, and I wrote like a whole world building segment bit for like a short film I want to do with like a horse and an actual animated character.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, I think it's like similar with you. Like world building is of course a really big part, but for me it gets sparked by learning a new thing. Like I do something new and all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, I can make a horse model walk. Then now I
Yeah,
can make a story and world around these characters. It's kind of
that's cool.
interesting. But yeah, I've always noticed your work is very like stylized in a sense, like where it has that storytelling behind it.
Mm.
All right.
Yeah.
So just, I guess we'll go on for the next resource question. We're taking our sweet time for each question, so let's hurry. When you can't find exact model matches for your reference, do you build your own or adapt alternatives? For me, I use SpeedTree. I try to make my own models for trees at least and shrubs. And for other things like grass, if it's a smaller asset, I can normally get away with something that looks similar. I don't know how you guys feel. Aaron, I'll start with you
Yeah.
maybe, because you're like a speed tree person as well.
Me? Sorry, did you say me or
Yeah, Aaron,
Sam?
yeah.
Yeah, no, for me, I'm the same. Like generally, like if I'm doing 99% animation stuff now, like I have to build it in SpeedTree. Like nothing else is animating that thing for me. So, yeah, you're building it on your own, or just I mean, I was going to say use the SpeedTree library, but that can sometimes be more of a headache. Sometimes it's easier just to build your own thing. I'm trying to think what else that question could expand to, if not foliage assets, or like terrain assets. Like if it's a rock, like I mean, you can get some pretty unique rocks out there that already exist. But if you need something really bespoke, I mean, you will have to ZBrush that, or commission someone. Like I mean, there's only a few ways to get really unique. Generally, though, like if I think this is one of the questions. Maybe it's not. I don't mean to jump the gun, but it's like one of the questions is if you can learn 3 apps really well. So I mean, SpeedTree is, if you're doing environment work, you need to know a foliage app, and so it's as much feedback as I have for SpeedTree. I think it could be a lot more user friendly, or there'd be a user friendly angle. It's definitely one to sink your teeth into, because then you will have no issues with any foliage asset. You just can make them all, you know.
Yeah,
I
I
think
agree.
my Sam, do you want to go?
If possible, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have a fairly unique type of perspective here because I haven't downloaded
Sam's got
like
a very unique perspective. I'll make everything from
yeah,
nothing.
I haven't downloaded a Quixel asset in probably years. I have a very small set of assets that I have, and they're usually just a couple textures from Quixel that I just use in everything. I'm very much like I enjoy making my own stuff a ton. I build my own tools for a lot of different things. So I do a lot of work in Houdini for that. But I also have gotten recently into scanning my own foliage and stuff as well. So not even using like Quixel textures and such for that. When I don't have access to uh like an exact model, like sometimes it's also just impossible. Like the larger issue that I have is that sometimes if I'm not willing to, shoot, where am I even going with this? I'm so sorry, guys. I'm
Bro,
getting
Sam
scared.
is so high right now, bro. He's so
I'm so
he's
high.
greening out. He's greening out.
Yeah. I guess the concise answer to this is that I definitely prefer to build my own. Usually, often, even if I can find exact model matches, I just think that's much more rewarding.
I think, but like you're also like very good at like making your own tools for that kind of stuff. Do
Yeah.
you feel like that's also important, like having, because I mean we use, you know, tools that are already made and stuff, but is there a reason why you decided to make your own tools? Is it because you were just so is it just for fun, or was it because you really found like you wanted specifics in your models that these other tools that are available couldn't give you?
Well, I don't think I necessarily think about it from an output centric perspective. Like, to use the example, like, I know the YouTube audience, like my YouTube audience, isn't necessarily as familiar with my work with like Houdini and terrain tools. But like, just for context, I don't use Gaia for my terrains. I built like kind of this pipeline in Houdini that I use for terrains nowadays that I think is pretty solid. The reason why I decided to put so much effort into that, first of all, that wouldn't have happened if I didn't think it was fun. But I also wanted to have the ability to experiment with the workflows that I could use to get to the end results that I wanted. So it was again motivated kind of by the discovery aspect of it, right? Like, what would happen if I integrated this tool with kind of like this already existing workflow? Like Gaia has a pretty good workflow for terrains and such, but there's kind of these pain points that a lot of folks tend to have with them. So what if I could sort of expand
License
on
revoked.
that?
License revoked, bro.
License revoked. Yes, yes. Um, I'm not talking about any of this, any of like the Gaia 2 stuff, because I know that's a thing. But like
We're cutting this.
Gaia has
Martin's like, bro, I just got hired. Chill.
We're cutting this. We're cutting
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Censored.
I'm gonna move on from Gaia in like 1 second. But like, there's a lot of like, there are like a couple things that people generally run into with Gaia that I wouldn't say are problems with the workflow, but things that you have to be mindful of. So my idea was I wanted to create something that could kind of bypass those by default, and that I could have the type of control that I wanted.
So I asked you
I
this
create.
question just to like, because I think I have a very similar feeling about creating assets, but I also know that it's not 100% necessary. And I know there's a lot of beginners out there who feel really overwhelmed when they see
I was
an
about to
artist.
touch on that too.
Yeah, they see an artist who created their own mountains, created their own foliage, then created the scene, created, you know, like the whole animation around it. And then they're like, holy, how do I learn all these softwares and how do I do all this? And I wanted to, like, I know, Sam, like, I know you don't do it because you had to, or it was more because you enjoyed it. And that's very important for people to know. It's like, you
Yeah, I
will
think that's a
eventually
good
get to
point.
a point where you enjoy, you know, you're like, okay, I'm comfortable in Blender now, da da da. Okay, I'd like to, instead of using the tree assets of the library like Botanic or something, you know, it's always a little bit limiting when you're not creating your own stuff, but
Yeah, like
then you can get speed tree and do your own stuff,
my
but don't feel
my
100% obligated.
yeah, please. My workflow is so beyond like autistic. It's actually funny. that's, that's not to say that it doesn't have.
It's just tistic at this point. There's no it's just tistic.
Yeah,
Full blown tistic.
yeah.
Tism. The
Like,
tism goes hard.
Yeah.
another thing is like I don't use speed tree because I built my tree tools. It's like that was unnecessary.
Yeah. Sam went a
I
step
don't
beyond
even
all of
make
us.
like I don't even make like foliage heavy renders anymore. It's like, why did I even do that? Well, it's just because I have too much free time on my hands. Yeah, I hope my answer before was like somewhat clear. I do it because I like to do it, and because I think that there's room for innovation with workflows nowadays. I think we're stuck kind of in like using the terrain creation example, like that specifically the height map creation. World Machine came out over a decade ago, I'm pretty sure. And it had a lot of revolutionary new features for that time. Like, it was really good at erosion processing and stuff in a way that previous softwares weren't. And then that kind of got adapted into a bit more modern package like Gaia and World Creator. And World Creator is a little bit more of a not distinct, sorry. It's a little bit more of a unique software in the sense that it has a bit of a different structure to it. But I kind of, through my time with Gaia, realized that the sort of experience I picked up working with those Gaia workflows combined with some of the little bit more technical like programming stuff that I'd done in the past, I could implement some interesting features that could really enhance the Gaia workflow for myself. And that was where a lot of that was the exigence of my terrain creation pipeline development. Just trying to see how I could even further modernize those workflows. And modernize, I guess, is probably the wrong word, but like adapt them to my specific proclivities.
Yes. Cove, I have a question because I think you and I might be similar. Like, for example, like do you think you build most of your assets at this point, or are you like maybe like me a bit where maybe it's like 50-50, half your assets you make and the other half are just libraries? Because I think I still like use a lot of library stuff.
Yeah, so I think I'm going in reverse, because when I first started 3D, I thought that I was a fraud if I didn't model and texture everything from scratch. I thought, what's the point of doing 3D at all? So I learned to sculpt and to hard surface model and substance painter, speed tree, like everything was from scratch. And now I'm doing therapy on myself to to basically like be okay with using libraries. And now it's like I'm thinking of everything in terms of, do I have to create this from, like, is it necessary that I create this from scratch? If I don't, 100% get the model for free or buy it from a library. Because everything just takes so much time. And if someone has made it better than me, I'm not going to try to like feel like, I'm not going to try to stroke my artist's ego by proving to myself that I can make it myself, because it's just going to take up time. Let the person who is better at it than you make it for you and use it in your project. And if it lets you get closer, basically the idea is if it lets you get closer, hold on, let me reframe that. Whatever gets you closest to what you want to create the quickest is the way that you should do it, no matter what. So even if that means completely using asset libraries for everything, use it. And don't be ashamed of that.
It's something I've been struggling with, but at this point I'm kind of half-half, where I want to at least create maybe one of each asset myself, in a sense. Like for the plants, I want to create the trees, and then I'm okay using shrubs and grasses that are from libraries. And for like the models, maybe like the ships and houses, I'm like, okay, I'll create some of them, but I'll lean into like libraries for other things. I think, yeah, it really depends, as you say, about your time. Because for Sam, for example, Sam's work takes a lot of time because he's creating the tools in which he's creating the art with. So it takes a lot longer, but at the same time, Sam can then, really, create unique kind of art. And it depends on your goal, I suppose.
I think we kind of have to separate the tool creation process from the art creation process. Because, of course, the tools, like the terrain tools, as you guys have been aware, have been a project that has been going on for like years at this point. But my actual, like, when I'm creating something with them, it's like honestly under an hour for most of my terrain stuff. So that does pay dividends.
I would say my advice to people starting 3D is learn the skills that would go into creating everything from scratch. But then once you have those skills, if you're interested in those skills, once you have those skills, don't waste your time making things from scratch for no reason. Let's just say you have an abandoned hallway and you have some lights on the ceiling, and you have some electrical boxes, and you have some rubble on the floor and stuff like that. You can let other people make those things for you. You don't need to model all those from scratch.
Yes.
But if you have a really unique object that's going to be the hero of your piece that you can't find on asset libraries, no one's made it, and you think it's it's really important for your project, then you have all the skills that you need in order to make that unique to you object.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Like, use your own custom built stuff for like the actual important storytelling aspects of your scene or whatever. Like, don't over rely on libraries there, but for all the extra stuff, yeah, just use the libraries, or if you have quick tools, you can create it. Yeah, so I think that pretty much answers that one. Don't be ashamed, but have a basic understanding, right? Like, if you don't understand at all how something is created, then I don't think that's good in any CG like job too. And that could maybe be a segue, because I wanted to cover a few of these career questions, and I know we don't have too much time left. This could segue into some of the career questions.
Sorry for taking up so much time on the last one.
Dude, don't be sorry. You're fine.
It's all good.
We're having great information come out here, but I feel bad for people who ask questions. We can answer everything because we're a bit drawn out. We're not very quick.
I'm hoping we answer questions from other questions as well. Like, I think we are overlapping in that way too.
Definitely,
yeah, I think we have.
Yeah. So for the career questions though, because we haven't touched upon career. So I think the main question that people are going to have is like, maybe they want to have a bit of backstory about our career so far. And I think that could be maybe a good way to start with how did you break into the 3D industry, and how long did it take from learning to landing your first job? I mean, I can start here with, for me, I've been doing art like all my life, but just different forms of art. And the 3D thing, I kind of started it around 2019, 20, something like that. And it took a long time. I was doing this as a hobby for at least, I would say 3-4 years before I got my first really silly jobs. And in that case too, like, if you don't expect, I mean, this sounds maybe bad, but don't expect to land like an instant like movie studio job as your first gig. You're probably gonna do some dumb renders for your friend of your uncle who needs, I don't know, something small in 3D,
something creepy, probably.
Yeah, probably something. No, for me it was interiors
in some way.
For me it was interiors. I had a distant uncle who was working with some kind of bureau, was making interior renders for this new housing project. They had a horrible budget. I don't work with them anymore, so I can talk. No, just kidding. But yeah, basically it was it was a very low paying job, but it was a job, and I was very happy to even make any money with it. And from there, I realized like, holy shit, or holy cow, I can make money with something I like doing. And then, I landed a few more of those small, like, via, as we say in Dutch, like jobs from people who and then I put my work out there on YouTube, ArtStation, social media. It's great. And then I got clients via social media. But I do have to say, and to preface this, is that I did a lot of I'm not saying I'm great and the best or whatever, but I did like really care for my art before uploading it, I suppose. Like, I didn't just upload whatever, and I was probably like the most critical to my own work. Like, I was very hypercritical. And even on those jobs where I got paid like $200, I spent like a month and a half just draining my time into them, because I was so like, perfectionist, I suppose, at the time. So when I put my stuff up on social media, clients actually saw that and were impressed by my work and wanted to work with me. It's gonna take a while, and clients don't want to work with just any random schmuck, I suppose. So you have to definitely love your stuff and take good care of your portfolio. I would love to hear from you guys, how you guys got your first jobs and then kind of broke into the industry.
Yeah. So, well, for me, I guess mine is slightly different because I've never done any freelance or anything like that. And I've never wanted a studio job either. So my thought process has been on the teaching side of things. So if you really love 3D, and you want to make money from it, but you also want to have a little bit more control over what you do, and maybe you have good recording skills, you're charismatic or whatever, teaching it is a huge industry that I think, people don't overlook it, but you can teach it. So what I do is Patreon, and then I also created a course, and that's allowed me to go down a slightly different path than freelance studio stuff, which is great too. It just wasn't for me.
I do want to be realistic. You have to be business smart to do teaching, just so you know. Cov, like I know there's a lot of people who want to do YouTube, and it's a great dream, but it's I think Cov definitely hit like a point in the market in a sense where there's a lot of Blender tutorials out there, a lot, but Cov is hitting on stuff that people don't cover. So
yeah, if you have a unique idea, so if you bring something new to the table and teach it,
my channel would not have made it past 100 subscribers if I didn't actually have something new to tell. And I noticed there's a lot of Blender YouTubers out there nowadays that don't necessarily hit on anything new. They just rehash the same beginner stuff sometimes, and then just try to clickbait as much as possible. I wouldn't make your career that. That's not going to be very long. It's not going to be, very, how do you say it, like future-proof, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, teaching is definitely a great thing you can do, and you can even consider teaching IRL, because I know there's a lot of like small schools and stuff that are doing like little art 3D classes nowadays. So there's definitely all kinds of teaching availability.
I have a friend who I've actually had on my channel before, Mr. Johnny Fair, who's done that before. He taught at a university or an art school, and it's pretty cool. I do think actually that's all I'm going to say on the matter. It's a viable job. It's a viable job.
Aaron, you're kind of, I think, a bit maybe like me with like the freelancing and then going that way.
I think it's a tricky one to answer because I've as of next year I've been in the media side in the industry for 20 years. So I left school at 16, straight into I worked at Yahoo for 3 years. Then I worked in an ad agency for 3 years. Then I worked at a TV network for 8-9 years. But I went from editing to 2D animation, and then I just did all animating for on-air promos and stuff like that. Nothing to do with 3D. I comped for a guy that did Cinema 4D Octane, but I didn't know anything. I didn't do 3D at all. And then, not to get deep, but my dad passed away, and then I went through a big sort of shift in terms of I left my job. I was at home, didn't really know my direction because that sort of shook me up. And then my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, sort of suggested, we need to find a passion. And then I followed a bunch of dudes that did daily renders. And I knew nothing about 3D, but it was a new skill set and it was within the industry. So I'm like, all right, let's jam that. So I started learning cinema. Then I bought Octane, and then did dailies. And then eventually, I still remember the frame that I did. And I remember it was the first really environment frame, and it's god awful. But I remember thinking, I like this. And it always stuck with me, like how much I enjoyed that. And then I just sort of kept leaning further and further into the environment angle. This is like a year into doing dailies. And then I remember getting a message from Andrew Kramer from Video Copilot, who I'd learnt everything off for all the years that I'd done 2D animation, so that was like my hero. I knew his voice inside out. And it was for a job, and I couldn't believe it. And that was my first job in 3D. So, and then from that, and because that was an environment job, I just sort of kept pushing that angle. And then that sort of led to all the stuff with World Creator. And then that was like a 2.5 year sort of project through COVID. Then that launched. And then from that point, I just consider myself pretty blessed from the reception of that, and then how that rippled for me. So I do think there was sort of luck in positioning. I worked my ass off, but I think the reception of that, I just was very lucky, and it sort of landed the way that I'd hoped for.
You're being humble when you say that's luck, because
I know I put in the work, but it's just I feel very blessed with the response, or humbled by the response.
That's really cool.
I mean, I just realized that Aaron's Unk status is like confirmed. You are way beyond us in this career thing.
Yeah,
but,
don't even listen to us.
Yeah, don't listen to
Dude,
us. But
it's
I'm gonna get you in
crazy
trouble.
I mean,
crazy
I'm
knowing
getting Unk status too, bro. I'm hitting 25 soon, and it's scary.
Dude, I
But
just turned 35. That's nuts.
oh yeah. But yeah, career wise, I think a lot of people who are, I know a lot of people in Blender, especially now, I'm seeing a kind of that money making thing coming into it, and people want to, you know, like the hustler culture. I mean, I remember
Be okay
being in
with
the
being
gym.
poor. Let's just say that.
Yeah, be okay with being poor, but especially like hustler culture's coming up. People are kind of stepping away from the 9 to 5 life, you know, that people don't dream about that anymore. And they want that hustler mentality, you know, I'm going to make my own company and this and that. And I will be real, I have my own company, and I'm blessed now that I got like some stable work again, because I went from freelance to stable work for a while, back to freelance, and now I'm back to stable work for the foreseeable future. And I can just say, like, even in, like, yeah, it's sometimes maybe just like look for studio jobs too. Don't be in the hustler status. Like, be open
Well,
to
I
just
think it's
do
like
the
you
9 to 5s.
if you're able to find a niche and then become like proficient at that niche, like there's your like I know, again, like one of my best mates, he's working at the TV network I was working at, and I still bring him in on projects. He is much more of a generalist for like on-air graphics, right? Like more the motion graphics stuff. He's freaking awesome. Like he's amazing at it. But that is such a competitive space. So again, if he were to break out into full freelance, that's a way tougher thing than me breaking out into freelance, because I'm in such a niche, and you know, practicing that niche and becoming good at that niche, it's much easier to hire someone like me, or for me to find a job, than someone that's really good at motion graphics, because there's 10 more of someone like him than there is of me. So it's not, you don't necessarily have to niche hunt, because you have to be passionate about it.
I
But
don't
yeah,
know if is environment and art still a niche at this point, because I
I
think it's
think at the
become
level
quite
that
mainstream.
Aaron,
Yeah, at
I
the
was going
level
to
of
say it
Aaron, of
depends on your
course.
proficiency.
Yeah, because Aaron has 10 years on me even, so that like that's the thing for people coming into it now. As Cub says, hey, don't like do this thing, but don't only think about money. And like I never thought about money. I studied business. I did this thing for fun, and I was thinking, hey, even if I can't work in this industry, I can, you know, be useful and work in all kinds of fields. You know, I think we all have other skills past 3D. And then
well, speak for
eventually
yourself,
just
mate.
okay. Bro, you're a coder pretty much. You have skills, dude.
But yeah, what's the point? What's the point if you're being an artist for a living? Like, what's the point in doing it if it's not for passion? So like you know, like you're not sitting in front of a desk doing tax, you know, that's more rhythmic. Like you're needing to be creative, and so for that to be firing, for you to be good at your job, I don't know how else to do it other than being passionate. Like, because you don't want to do it because you're desperate. Like, because that's not going to lead to anything. Yeah, it has to, passion has to be first.
If you're doing it because you're desperate, it turns from one of the most rewarding jobs into one of the most draining jobs, because that's
Totally.
Yeah, that's true.
will
Just
affect
don't be
you.
these hustlers. Don't be these hustlers that like make
Yeah,
perfume product renders or something. Like it just gets really bad.
It gets repetitive too. God, I can't imagine just only doing product renders.
I don't think there's an actionable set of steps that you can take to get money in 3D. I've found the most success by trying to become exceptional in my niches, as Aaron said. And my jobs have always reflected that, right? Like my first jobs were space art, because that was what I really focused on, and that's where I really set myself uh, up against the competition. Sorry. And then it was more into environment art, and then now it's still kind of environment art, but it's the specific brand of environment art that I've put a lot of effort into, which is the very atmospheric types of environment art. So usually I'll get people
Exactly,
asking
it's like
me
the
to
passion
do.
too, right? Like you have that niche because of that passion that you have.
My last two projects have been heavily involving like clouds and such. And if there's anything that I love, it's clouds. If there's anything I'm good at, it's clouds, right? And I'm decent enough at general environment art, and I have my main job last year was as an environment artist at a studio. But if you see my work, you're probably going to hire me to do something with my specialties, right? Which is like the as I mentioned before, like clouds right now. I am hoping to break into like a more technical field though, because I do really like the I I mean, I've talked about it for like half an hour, but like I love building tools. Um
But that's
yeah.
another thing. Like you want to get into the technical field, so you actually have like these really amazing tools that you develop, and like you're not necessarily just doing it because you want that job. You already are passionate about it, and then now you kind of yeah, exactly. So
the jobs will come.
The jobs will come if you show true passion.
Yeah, and like this is like I'm by no means like a software developer. I kind of wish I was competent in that field, but I'm not really. I work at a fairly high level because I do everything like through Houdini. But I do watch like some software development YouTube, and that's like a much more like there's so many more people that go on YouTube to try to get into like the software development industry. So there's a lot more of this sort of gamifying of these types of tasks there, right? It's hustler culture that you see in like Blender, but taken to the extreme. And nowadays, like you're finding a lot of people in the software development field are having trouble finding jobs. And I think it's because they haven't really done enough necessarily to make distinct projects. They've kind of built up a rather milquetoast like set of skills, but they haven't necessarily put a lot of effort into creating like a truly unique application of those.
No, I think that's also like a thing with like everybody's going to school nowadays, and that's a really good thing. But then when I remember going to college, I went to like a business type program, but you know, we all know business is like the I don't know what to do later in life type program. But yeah, I really realized there's the few people who made it, I guess, in that like they actually found very interesting careers, and they had a passion about something completely different. They just followed it. I know multiple people who have got like their own videography studios and that kind of stuff, and they just like really just followed their passion, and clients eventually saw that passion and skill and then just sent work their way.
Passion will draw out the skill much better than raw study will.
There's so many people who just like follow the basic curriculum, I guess, and their portfolio at the end of college is just I don't know, just like a few of these college projects. Like they made some scrum boards, and they're gonna have a tough time getting interesting work, like that. And it's the same for 3D. If you're just kind of doing the basic things, following tutorials, not really innovating, I guess, on your field or finding a niche, then you're probably going to have a harder time getting a job. But when you just follow your passion, I mean, you have to be passionate. If you follow that passion, you're probably going to do something unique, because we're all unique people. We're all wired differently. Mm-hmm. And it probably will resonate with somebody out there, because there's 7 billion of us, and they'll probably hire you to do something. So
yeah. That's really
well.
that's
I guess with that said, like it's like the way at least I've always thought about it through building show reels 20 years ago, trying to pivot, and I think I've always approached my portfolio as looking at it from the the hirer's perspective. Like, why pick Aaron over James? Like, what will separate me?
Fuck you, James.
I know James has got James has got nothing.
This will be the third question then, right? Like, what should a portfolio include? I think this is like...
right. Is that a question?
There's a question here. It's like, what should a portfolio include to get work as an environment artist? I mean, then we can cover this.
I think it's just, you need to think about why you should be hireable. And so I guess I remember, I hate to say it, but like 15 years ago, working, and one of the guys we're working with, he did the beak animation on Happy Feet. He was in charge of like the extra penguins' beaks, not even the primary penguins, the extra penguin. And that was a job. But I'm pretty sure I don't think that job would exist these days, because jobs are much more generalist. So like you could get in being a generalist and and you really enjoy dipping your toes in a bit of character animation, a bit of this, a bit of that. But exclusive. I wouldn't consider myself a generalist because I don't do generalist stuff. I'm strictly environment, and I can afford to just be that at least at the moment. So I guess in that way, my portfolio, I want to show that I can do as many environments as possible. So that's why I'll do not. I don't limit myself to just 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of looks. Like I'll try to do anything, just to try to exemplify that I am an environment that can cover all environment artist, and sort of that's my angle. And so I think it's just coming up with an angle to present why you're sellable. Like what about your brand and your art is different from James or whoever.
Yeah,
Yes,
I think
for sure.
streamlining your portfolio to focus on the main things is important. I kind of learned that recently. I used to like post just whatever work I had, but I kind of recently trimmed it all down because I realized that if I show a client, oh, I do interiors for houses, but I also do these big, massive landscapes, and oh, I also model this boat, and then I also do this big, massive landscapes. They're getting a bit confused as to what I'm.
The portfolio needs focus. Yeah.
So an art station, you can use folders. So imagine you are really a generalist, and I guess you really just do all kinds of various things. You could make folders for that and like make sure it's split up. But if you're not necessarily that good like me in modeling, don't upload your models to ArtStation or whatever. Just only upload the environment art if that's your niche.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good point.
If a client is asking about something, then you can show, oh yeah, I can do some modeling. But
yeah, that's all I should have I was going to add before. Like, never upload something that you don't want to work on. Like, don't upload something that you have done that you never want to do again. Because even though it's work and it shows that you've been busy, put that on a resume, but don't put it on any portfolio because you're going to just say no anyway.
Even with your resume, you should streamline it a bit, because I know a lot of people who do resumes and they'll add any work experience. But when a client is hiring you from recruiters who have talked to in the past, they don't look at resumes if you are like, oh, they're hiring a 3D environment artist, let's say, and you put on your work experience like, oh, I used to do like, videography for a beer brand, like in my case. Then they don't care. That doesn't apply.
Well, actually, that was a question.
Work.
Do you guys still use resumes? Is that a thing?
Yeah. I mean, for when you're, I normally get my jobs just straight from the like whatever social media somebody contacts me. But I have sent out resumes recently because it was a bit of a dry spell. So I made my resume and made sure it was very streamlined to a kind of work I wanted to do and just sent that out. But eventually, my social media got me a job again.
I was gonna. That was sort of what I wondered. Like, I guess I've never sent out a. I don't even have. I've never had a resume personally, but I do.
Resume.
I guess I've always just wondered, like, and assumed that your visual portfolio speaks enough.
Yeah.
Like, and I only say that for someone that might be practicing on the side. They're working their 9 to 5 and they're practicing this stuff, and they're like, oh, I'm never going to get a job because I don't have a resume. It's like, no, I feel like your art carries 99%.
That's true, but here's a big thing, and there's a lot of recruiters who don't know anything about 3D. It's kind of funny, but a lot of these bigger companies, like the HR people, are just HR people. So I've been in a game studio, and they contacted me like, we want you to be a senior environment artist. And I was like, I mean, it sounded kind of too good to be true. I was very confused. I went there, and then it ended up being the HR person who had seen my work, was like very impressed with my environments, but didn't understand that I didn't when I actually talked to the managers who were like, 3D artists, and they were like, okay, we need this and that from you. I was like, okay, none of that aligns with my work. I've never used these softwares. I don't know how to do this real time stuff. I was already kind of confused, but it sounded good, so I came. And then it just ended up being the recruiter didn't really understand that there's different softwares for these different things. So I think
that's somewhat baffling to me.
Yeah, but I've had, I can tell you guys privately about how many calls I've had with clients who don't know a single thing about 3D. They just think a 3D environment can be made anywhere. Like, they don't understand that there's specific software engines, render things, whatever. I had somebody ask me if I could make a photorealistic environment with like high poly everything in a web browser, and they were using a web browser engine which could do like very low poly, almost 2D stuff. It was baffling, but there's a lot of people out there. So in that case, a resume is good because you can say like what skills, aka like, you know, what softwares and stuff you're using, and then like,
having your
HR person
listed somewhere is, I think, a good move.
Plus a lot of companies are archaic, you know, like if you want to apply to a job, they require a resume. They don't.
But like, you can do that on your ArtStation portfolio. Like, this doesn't need to be a discrete thing.
But normally they ask for like a PDF because they're just going through it, like these big lists of applicants.
I mean, if they require a separate resume, of course, have one. But like ArtStation allows you to attach like sort of, it's quote unquote like metadata to your art, like your software that you used, the specific whatever subject matter.
But in the case of like applying on LinkedIn, for example, like I wouldn't just send my ArtStation. I would send probably a PDF with a link to my portfolio, of course, but a PDF resume. Sure. Yeah. In that setting, of course. Otherwise, I would just link, if somebody's, you know, like asking like, hey, what kind of work do you do? I just link my ArtStation probably, or my YouTube. But yeah, TLDR, should we TLDR that to streamline it? As Aaron said, don't upload any work you don't want to work in. Just streamline it towards your niche. It's even though you've done all kinds of work and you're proud of it, if it's not necessarily your expertise, then it's probably not necessary on your portfolio. It's better to just be an expert on your portfolio and be a generalist on the actual workflow.
I also think you probably don't have to stress it too much. I think that if your work is good enough, you don't have to gamify it, I don't think. I think you can just...
But just depending... This was the portfolio question, so if somebody's asking how should my portfolio look, then that will be the TLDR. And then, now this is going to be an interesting one. I don't know if you guys want to talk about it.
I'm super excited for this one.
Oh, wait, which one are you looking at? Because I'm looking at one. I thought this one could be kind of a refresher.
I thought we were moving on to number 4.
I want to do number 4, but like, okay, Aaron doesn't have too much to say because it's a Blender specific. So I hope you're okay with that, Aaron. You're not relevant. I'm sorry, Unc. Okay, is it possible to go pro?
You guys can talk Blender stuff if you want.
Okay. Is it possible to go pro as an environment artist using only Blender? How do clients view Blender in a professional setting?
Was that the Blender specific question?
Yeah, that's the Blender specific one.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I can chime in on that for sure.
Oh shit. Okay.
I don't think there's much to be said there. I mean,
the answer is yes, of course. I mean, you can replace the word Blender with any 3D app, and the answer is yes.
I think the more interesting question is why can you get anywhere using only Blender?
I guess Sorry,
I think the answer is similar to the last question we did, is that your work speaks beyond just the buttons that you've pressed, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily matter that volume scatter shader in Blender is called volume scatter. It's called like atmosphere or whatever in Octane.
I think it's very important to know that like studios will hire you for your skill as an artist in a sense, not necessarily your skill in a certain software. So even if like I am a Blender artist, I got hired to do Houdini and Maya and what else was there, like 3ds Max and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care.
And they realized that they had to train me. They were like, yeah, we're gonna have to probably take the first month, hold your hand a little bit because you don't know how to use these softwares. But they did that, and then afterwards it was just like, okay, I know how to do my work in these softwares. It wasn't necessarily that I'm an expert now, but yeah.
And that happens all the time. Even if you're very clear that you are, for me, Cinema 40 Octane. Like, I mean, I've gotten some massive offers from places that have nothing to do with those tools, and they would not care. They just want, they're more so looking at the fact that you as an artist, or, you know, they just want your I guess, theory, your eye, your skill set, the way you approach things, and they know that the training is just supplementary to that. If as an enticer, and you can take it or you can leave it, but whatever tool you learn on, as long as it's training your eye, your ability, the way you put things together, and your artistic direction, it's sort of redundant what you're using to get there.
Yeah. And it's
I
also a
think
thing that like Blender is pretty professional nowadays. Like for a lot of tasks, like modeling and stuff, I see a lot of big studios have zero problem with people doing a lot of tasks inside of Blender,
I would
as long
I
as it
would just
doesn't
say
mess
the
up the pipeline.
caveat being, if you want to be an environment artist for games and you're wanting to learn, like that is a different thing. Like then you should be using Unity or Unreal or whatever it might be, CryEngine, whatever tools it might be to learn that side, because it is a different approach. It's not a universal translation. So if you're wanting to do film and on air ad agency stuff, then yeah, use your blenders, your C4Ds, your 3SMs, whatever. But yeah, if you're specifically wanting games, don't do that. Use game tools and do the same thing.
I think the most concerning aspect of this question for me is the word only. It's not because I don't think that Blender alone can't get you the skills. It's that word kind of implies that you're specifically restricting yourself only to Blender.
Oh, okay. So you're meaning like no Gaia, no Speed Tree, no Houdini, no whatever. It's 100% Blender only.
I'm not sure that was necessarily the intent of the question. I'm gonna I'm gonna say that using Blender primarily, of course, you can get into the industry. We are all examples of that. I've gotten into the quote unquote industry using Blender primarily. But a lot of Blender folks in the community have a large aversion to branching out from Blender. And I think that's the much larger problem because yes, you can get into the industry using only Blender, even if it's like strictly only Blender, no Gaia, no Speed Tree, no whatever, because again, your skills will transcend the software after a certain point. But if you're unwilling to learn and adapt to different studio workflows, that's a much bigger problem that's not solvable by your employer. So they're just not going to see that they're not going to. It's not appealing.
Yeah. I mean,
So
if you're limiting yourself as a person, like you're limiting your growth, then any company's going to look at you like, okay, well, you're not a useful asset. I mean, in any setting, in any job, if you're saying, I just want to do this one task in this specific setting, and if it changes at all, I will freak out, then probably people are going to avoid you. Yeah. I think this is ChatGPT kind of messing with us a little bit because the person is asking that it's a bit of it's not spelled out that clearly, but it's basically just saying, hey, can I become an environment artist pro by being a Blender user? So it's not necessarily saying only Blender. It's just more like if I'm a Blender user, can that translate to professional skills? And that's absolutely yes. I mean, all of us, except for Aaron here, have done Blender, and we've all, earned money. So that would pretty much constitute us as a pro, as a professional. And Sam and me have worked in big productions. Of course, I mean, I use Blender in a small scale in my production. I don't know if you use Blender at all when you were working at a studio.
Yeah, we actually use primarily Blender.
Oh, well, there you go. So even as a Blender user, you can still use Blender even in big productions. I mean, I think the idea that Blender is not professional is kind of old at this point.
And most of the time, studios, even if you're not a Blender user, or like let's say you are a Blender user and the rest of the studio is 3SM, like they generally, like I remember, what was it? It was previs work. I was offered previs work on I think it was Mad Max 2, and I mentioned I was a cinema user, and I think the department was 3D Studio Max, and they did not care. They're like, fine, we'll build a pipeline tool to speak between the two. If you join on, I didn't end up doing the gig, but it was a very instant. Oh, okay, we'll build a pipeline tool, and you can just keep using cinema. It's sort of like whatever.
Another thing to consider is that in a larger studio environment, the sort of tools that you're used to, like Blender, Houdini, whatever, they aren't actually identical to the tools that you have like on your computer. Like oftentimes there is the pipeline component of it that is
like the custom tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The
and
in-house tools. So
some studios take this way further than others. Like I know
Weta.
Yeah, Weta
Crazy
is
tools.
crazy. Yeah. They go way beyond just like plugins to their software. It's just there's a lot of stuff. Even
if you're going to work in a
studios,
studio, even smaller studios, you're exactly like even inside of Houdini, they'll make their whole own like tool, which is like you have to learn it from scratch anyway. So even if you're a Houdini user, that doesn't mean you are already ready to go for the job. You're gonna have to be trained to do this job in further studio.
That's right. But that's factored into the hiring process anyway. Like,
Yeah,
so all they're hiring for
exactly.
again is your eye and your theory. That's it.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can get a job as an environment artist in Blender. Don't worry about it. Blender is pretty professional, and at the same time, professional companies at least, are very aware that you have to be trained and you don't just start working instantly. That's the TLDR.
The only caveat there is like make sure you can communicate that you're able to learn new stuff on the job.
Yeah. Be open.
But that's like literally the only thing, at least as far as my experience is concerned.
Interesting opinion question coming up. This one could be interesting. Where do you think Blender, or 3D art in general, is heading over the next 5 years with AI in the mix? Start writing, start fighting. Come on.
Oh, lordy.
Clickbait title incoming right here. Come on, boys, say something controversial.
I mean,
please.
maybe it's because I'm 350, but I think it's just like, until copyright laws change, I don't really see much changing in 5 years because, brands, films, backlash aside, because people hate it, like it looks really good on X, and as far as the tech side, absolutely incredible. But until brands are able to copyright their content or the content that AI creates, which they can't legislate, I don't know how it moves. Because up to this date, like brands exclusively chase copyright and ownership, and if you merely smidge at breaking that, you get sued. And so I just don't like, they love ownership. So the fact that they love ownership, I just don't know how AI impacts that unless they train on their own data sets, which
I mean, there is a thing though. That's the big brands. So when we're talking about big brands, I fully agree. I don't think there's a big change coming. However, the freelance market, it's a very different game. You're going to have smaller clients, bigger clients. It's going to be.
But they're still working for brands, though, right?
No, it can be a lot of individuals too. I've had a bunch of people just doing small individual projects, and they, Americans have a lot of money to spend apparently, so they could hire me.
Like for who? Like the people who are they doing the projects for?
It could just even be like a musician being like, "Hey, I want to have a 3D background
for that sort of stuff." Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like small musician, I've had that kind of stuff.
At most you're missing out on a couple of $100 there. I guess I was thinking more like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, BMW.
No.
Like they're not going to do anything.
We're tiny creators over here. We're not 350 yet. No, I'm kidding. But it is true. Like big brands, big studios, I wouldn't worry about it. There could maybe be some AI concepting being done there or something, but it's not like a big deal. What I would say is the freelance market is different now. There is a mix of maybe the attitude has changed a bit towards art in a lot of people who know nothing about art, and those are the people who are going to be hiring artists because they don't do it themselves. But AI, it's kind of hit a certain group, I guess, of people in a way where they, I don't know, look at art maybe in a bit more of a cheap way. They just think, well, AI can do this so quickly, and I only have to pay $30 a month for this subscription, blah blah blah. Why won't you do this whole video for me for $200? I've had that kind of stuff happen to me, so I'll see how that progresses, I guess. But that's like small freelance stuff. So, as I said, it's the smaller clients that you could have maybe a bit more of a negative experience because people who are very ignorant are gonna reference AI or even use AI and not hire you at all. But the big things, I think it's okay.
I just think the culture around it is so negative. and like even my father-in-law, he's a focus puller for Hollywood stuff, and every single contract for all of them have no AI clauses. And so like from that end, from Hollywood all the way down, which obviously does ripple, like I just don't know outside of Twitter and social media how it actually gets legs. Maybe in the short term it might appear that way, but long term I don't know how it does when it's not really sticking anywhere at a professional level. I can understand in the short term how it might appear that way though, and how it could change things in the short term. But I think long term it's I don't know the angle.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like I don't think it feels like a very similar gimmick to how NFTs and stuff
NFT,
were like,
yeah, it
yeah,
feels the exact. It breathes the
it
same air
feels
as
exact.
NFT, man.
Yeah, like just kind of a trashy money making vibe around it, and a lot of these sleazy people kind of pick it up as a thing. And it's a very negative vibe, as you say. Like, I mean, I use AI for some concepting sometimes, right? We use like the
Dude, it's
photo
amazing.
gen fill,
Yeah,
like
it's
whatever.
amazing.
I've used Magnific to upscale a render just to see like what kind of small details AI will throw in there, and I'm like, oh, cool, that I'll add that to my render. But I don't really know what like as you said, it's not really viable for big business at all. And some of these AI bros will claim it will be like, oh, see how quick it's developing, it's gonna be perfect. But I
Well, if it
still
was
see a huge
copyrightable,
lack.
game over.
Yeah.
Like if you could copyright it, game over. But you can't because no one owns these
Yeah.
data sets.
I don't think it's game over.
No, even
Well,
then,
I
I
don't
think
mean
there's still like
necessarily game over. I'm just meaning more so like then it's a bigger problem. But it's but that can't happen because no one owns it. So like that won't happen. You know, like it's not. It's sort of
Well,
like a.
I mean, there are quote unquote ethically trained AIs stuff coming up now, so I don't think that's necessarily an impossibility. I think the larger, so my opinion on this is like as basic as it is uneducated, because I kind of like this entire discussion. No fault of you guys, it just kind of upsets me because I don't like hearing about AI. Not necessarily because I'm concerned about it, I just find it irritating to hear because
Like
it's so
NFTs.
yeah, right. Like I don't want to deal with this on my day-to-day basis. I just I guess this is kind of like a question for the audience. Like how many projects with AI have you genuinely been like astounded by? Like for me, it's like there's nothing that I've been thoroughly impressed by with AI, really.
yeah. No,
So
that's why I'm saying it's like this
like
small gimmicky thing, really, like NFTs.
yeah, like okay, cool photo generator. Like I don't know. All of the coolest things that I've seen have been made by humans, and I don't think that there's necessarily a place for largely automated stuff in that sort of whatever collage of inspirations. I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
I think that will
you and
always be true. Like that
yeah,
will always be like if you walked past the Mona Lisa and you knew it was painted by Michelangelo's sneezing paint at a canvas, you'd be like, "Oh, that's cool, but that's random." But knowing that it was meticulously painted, that's what makes it interesting.
I mean,
So it's
literally
like,
though, like
yeah,
me and Martin met up in Washington D.C. like last month, and we went to the National Gallery of Art
right.
right next to the White House. It's like you're used to seeing these art pieces as just pixels on your computer, but when you see them up close, it's a completely different experience. And I wasn't
But if you
really
knew
able
they were
to
painted
appreciate
by
that.
accident, your
No, I
opinion
don't
would
think that
change.
necessarily actually changes it that much. I think that, well, no, I think you're actually right about that. I do think
I
that
think
that
the work
is a,
behind it is a very special thing.
yeah,
Exactly, like
it's a mix of
the
the work
craft,
and the history.
just the wonder of how did they do
Yeah.
this. It's very
I
fun.
I'm
can't,
much more. Sorry, I cut you off.
No,
yeah,
go.
I'll be done in a second. I can't appreciate the AI art, and of course, I'm projecting this onto everyone that's watching. But I don't think many people can appreciate the AI art as well. I don't think like an AI created movie or a movie that had extensive use of AI is going to perform well at the box office because people are already upset at movies being slop. I don't think introducing more slop into the mix is going to do any better for them, even if it makes the movies somewhat cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, what I was about to say was a little more skeptical until you said the slop thing. But I have a hard time believing that there won't be. Okay, hold on. I'll just say this. I think that whether it's AI or some other tool, or even if we lived 100 years ago, all of these jobs change and all of these professions change. And I think that you shouldn't attach yourself too much to the software that you work in or the technicalities of what you do. And you should more find, like for me with this AI thing, I've been searching more about what I like to do and why it is that I do the thing. And that will never change. And people will always appreciate things that are high quality things that have been created by skill. People always are inspired by that. So I don't think that 3D won't change. I'm not even so sure that there won't be a future where you sit down on Netflix and you turn on a show and, you know, most people out there, they're not appreciators of things like we are. They just want entertainment. And I think there will be a future where you just turn on something and it was created by AI. But I don't think that means that there won't be art. And I don't think that means that we won't have a place doing something that we enjoy. But I don't necessarily know that that will be Blender.
I agree halfway where I'm like, I think AI is just like, it's definitely going to change the industry a bit because we're already using it as tools, right? Like I'm using ChatGPT to learn Vex coding because it's just a really handy tool to help me like, you know, understand these things in my own way. I'm using Magnific AI. I used it for like upscaling my renders just to see what small details and texture things it throws in there as inspiration. We use GenFill and Photoshop to quickly like you know, iterate on shapes, general shapes in our renders just to see like, oh, okay, I should follow this in my render. So there's definitely a way it changes stuff. However, I also agree with like Sam where there is kind of a slop thing to AI fully. Like if you use AI as a tool in a sense where it just helps you create, and it's, you know, a small thing, then it's absolutely helpful and it's great. But when I see these AI, yeah, kind of animation things, and like even when ChatGPT is great at writing, but there is that AI feel.
But won't that go away eventually? Won't that go away though?
I don't know because the way computers work, it's like if you'll really recognize with ChatGPT, it's really good at writing, but it doesn't understand what it's writing. It just understands the algorithm, what it's trained on. Like these words next to each other make sense because
But we're just an algorithm.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I think there's a little deeper weirdness going on with us. So I think AI misses that weirdness, and I don't know.
I think AI is going to become the new generic, and I think that's how it's going to.
Yeah, maybe like just generic.
Well, it's more. I think music is a better example where I think, like to Cov's point, even if that AI film went away entirely, let's say Drake put out an album and then 312-year-olds prompted a Drake album, and they're all different. We all know that the actual Drake album is the one that's getting the listens. No one's really going to care about the perfect renditions what the 312-year-olds put out because it's not the guy. Like it's not who they want to be listening. Like even if it sounds the exact same. So it's like I think even if you were to parody it with perfection, you know, in the sense of music, I don't think people care.
It's the rarity thing. It's like stuff that doesn't have any value other than it's rare is valuable for people, even though it's like there's a million other things similar to it, but it's not rare like this one, so we value it. So maybe that's why art is also something like there's a one of a kind, or like, you know, there's only one me. So even if somebody can, I don't know, get AI to copy my art, it doesn't hit the same maybe as my art that I have created. Same with those artists. I remember a South Korean artist. They had an AI train off of his art and like imitate it. It was like one of the first things that was like the first AI drama. But I don't think that like tainted the guy's like artistic, how do you say it, like legend, like people still really
legacy.
Appreciated his art. Yeah, legacy. But because it was his art. He created it, and it was rare. You know, like the thousands of images created in his style have no value because there's just endless. You know, there's endless of them.
Yeah.
Here's my personal TLDR, which would be absolutely prepare for everything to change at a rate that is probably much quicker than a lot of things have changed in the past. Prepare for everything to change, but don't worry about art. Don't worry about you not having the potential to be an artist in the future. There will always be potential for that, and people will always appreciate art. But everything will change, though.
So TLDR: dig a bunker in the backyard, buy canned food, gun. You don't know what will happen. This shit, it might pop off, it might not. Don't let it stop you from being a 3D artist, though.
Yeah, we're all gonna die soon, so you know.
Yeah. World
Just
War
have
III is
fun.
around the corner. AI is just one of the many things that's going to cause it. Okay, next question.
I wonder. That's going to be sort of the.
This might be one of the more last ones, like artistic.
All the comments are going to be centered around that, and that's how we're going to know who actually watched it to the end.
I'm going to have a clickbaity title, like Covingsworth endorses AI takeover. Boom.
Yeah.
Covingsworth endorses. Actually, I won't say that. All right, let's go on to the next question.
3D artists discuss whether you should build a bunker. Okay. This is a fun one because I think we're all like, I think this is one of the things I want to learn personally about more because I don't know, I don't feel strong in it. It's kind of about cinematography. So, well, this is about, do you have a preference when it comes to cinematography of landscapes, like wide angle, telephoto, that kind of stuff? But I also want to just maybe merge this into in general, like how do you guys like to make your animations, like there's cinematography in it? Because I remember me and Sam laughing at the way how every environment artist ever does the thing I do. It's like the pan up, like you're panning up and moving forward.
That's what I always do. I also probably
like
still continue to do that.
There's the main environment artist showcasing of your terrain. But like, what's cool ways of getting more unique cinematography in there? Like, make it a bit more interesting.
I've been diving a lot into cinematography lately because I want to get more into like full films with character animations and something that resembles more of a short film, more of like a Hollywood production. Well, not a Hollywood production, but you get what I mean. And I think the biggest thing for me is I'm realizing that I knew nothing about composition or cinematography, and I was so bad at it. But there's so many resources out there, and you can build up a little knowledge base so quickly if you just watch like composition, like all the things that someone would learn to be a cinematographer in real life with a real camera is 100% applicable to 3D as well. So avoid being like how to get better at cinematography in Blender or how to choose 3D shots better. I think just study real life references and use sites like Shot Deck, like I was saying earlier, and Film Grab is the free alternative to that, where you can look at thousands and thousands of organized shots from movies and just study those, and then learn like the rule of thirds is really all you have to care about, and just go from there.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because cinematography, in a sense, it's a storytelling device. When you're just showcasing an environment, it's hard to think of very interesting camera angles because you just want to get that environment in frame. And I'm an animation person, so I want to make it an animation. But when I actually have a storytelling thing, like I'm making a short story, at that point I'm starting to look more at like camera angles and the real life examples to just get cool frames and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it just depends on what your goal is. I think if you're just trying to showcase something, go wide, make sure everything is in view. But if you're doing a really storytelling thing, then you have to use cinematography to help that storytelling. Sam, you've had some interesting camera angles, like flyovers and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I kind of put the camera wherever the landscape looks least shitty. I think that's my main guiding principle.
Yeah, pretty
I
much.
have about maybe 2 brain cells dedicated to composition and cinematography, and the rest of it is just dedicated to hiding my ass when it comes to bad 3D rendering angles. So
Yeah, I think that's why I want to learn a bit more, because I come from like a film background. And I feel like I was better back then, and then I have focused so much on just getting good assets in a sense that I've lost a bit of that cinematography. So I want to get back into just getting more cinematic frames that don't necessarily have everything sharp in focus.
Yeah, think
But
about
rather,
depth of field
yeah,
more. Like
yeah,
really
exactly.
put things out of focus, really stick things in the foreground. Think about depth of field a lot more. Think about movement, like motion blur. So nice. Even if you just throw on a motion blur like in your photo editing software, it can really help. And then think about contrasts, like big big contrasts of varying shapes and contrasts of light and dark in like kind of a cheap way, but like a really effective way that I found to get nice contrast in your shot is just to frame your subject with darkness. And it's like it's very kind of like standard, but if you have like a forest and you want to point it at a mountain, like shoot into the light so that you're shooting from the shadow side, and then put it out of focus, and it just like looks nice automatically. So you're framed with like a dark out of focus frame, and it's just kind of a quick and easy way to get nice composition.
Yeah, for sure. Like shooting into the light is like a very, kind of easy to do, like cool lighting setup. I think
Yeah.
it's just like for lighting and cinematography, I would say put your camera into something. Of course, we can discuss all like the leading lines, and I think Aaron would probably be better at that because he's like the composition master among us. But yeah, it's I think you're completely right, Cov, to just study movies and then see how they light their subjects and how they put certain things in frame, out of frame, in darkness, in light. That's the whole art.
Honestly, the
And
answer
I'm
to
not
like
good at
all of
it.
our questions is just to use
Study more, you
references like
lazy.
crazy and just
Yeah.
recreate your references.
They're
yeah,
asking us
really
questions and we're just
useless.
telling them like, fuck you, go study, bro. Like, why
Yeah.
are you asking me
Yeah.
this? I got nothing. No idea. Look at
I
movies.
had to get my phone charger, so I missed a lot of the answer. I guess I missed. Stop me if you guys have already spoken about this, but I think something that I realized a few years ago is when I was looking at references is I would say 70% of nature photography or landscape photography is ugly. Like it's ugly. And so, when I was building my compositions at that time, I was trying to really force something that was dramatic, low sun or sun in a perfect position or shadows in a perfect position, like really trying to force something interesting. But it never looked real because nature is not art directable or controllable like that. So then I adopted a philosophy of if I was on this trail or if I was standing on a rock looking at this vista, like there needs to be ugliness to it in a way because I'm not able to fully control all of the elements when I'm standing there about to take this photo. So it's building it's sort of an understanding like don't over force a shot or your composition or Atmos or God rays or whatever to make it interesting because that's not always going to be it might make it more interesting, but it sort of needs to be a more delicate handling because photography is not controllable the way that 3D is. So you sort of need to factor that in and dial things back as opposed to dialing it up. And so it's not necessarily a, what was the main question? How do you make it interesting or how do you make it real?
Just your preferences when it comes to cinematography. Like, what are your like ways? And I think you kind of hit it on the nail with the. I don't like I try to have a somewhat of a depth in my scene, but there is definitely like an off balance factor a lot of the
Yeah,
times I
so I
do a
think it's
comp
just
because I kind of feel
imperfections.
like yeah, like you can definitely get an interesting shot in real life, but not every mountain is
Totally.
going to be placed perfectly centered or the peak is perfectly centered.
Well, I
You can
guess that's the
only
other angle. Like
align it as
every
much.
photo that you see online is real, but not all of them are interesting. So, like when you're building a scene, you're trying to make it look real, and then in turn you're trying to also make it interesting, but it depends what the goal is. Like if you're like something that's real does not make it interesting, like as we can see from photos. Like photos are the evidence of that. Like if you're on Insta or Facebook or whatever, you're scrolling past real photos all the time. So if a render is to stand out from that, it depends the angle that you're getting at from. I don't want my render to stand out from that. I want it to look like a photo. So I'm more happy if people scroll past it, because it's then I have achieved what I've wanted to achieve, that it looks like a photo.
That's
But
true.
it just depends.
I feel like you can, though. Like the interesting factor for a landscape isn't always like pure composition. I mean, there's definitely there's definitely some composition to it, but I think that's why we all care so much about our assets. It's because it's that detail you have in the scene. Like, yeah, it's hard to explain, but like when I look at a cool mountain picture, hardly ever is it like a perfect composition. Like there's leading lines and the main focus of like, it's like, normally it's like the mountain is just taking the whole frame. It's a bit off balance. It's not perfectly, balanced, the image.
The lighting might be a bit ugly. Like it's not catching all the shadows perfectly, like whatever.
But the texture and that, like, that those, just the scale through that, all those little details you see, the little tree that you see that's just standing by itself in like a sea of like rocks that's come down or something, like all those small things to me are making landscape shots interesting, not necessarily perfect composition. Yeah, and like camera lenses.
I guess my final thing is, I love long lens photography, but height maps do not like long lens photography. So it's like I tend to stick at, your 15, 24 mil, just because height maps shit up close. So like I sort of do wide angle purely for that reason. Like more often I do it for that reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's mainly because height maps are really not forgiving. Like, if you've got a massive terrain and you're zooming up on that thing, like that looks terrible. So yeah. Long lens, wider lens just sort of is more forgiving.
Yeah, and I don't know why, but like the wide lens angle kind of gives you an interesting shape already. I feel like you can get a lot more.
Yeah, because you got distortion.
Composition. Yeah, the distortion adds to the composition a bit more. So I definitely use like 35 a lot, personally. I don't know, 24 is really wide, but
what is you guys' typical focal length?
50 is the base blender one, so if it looks good, it looks good. But I think 35 normally. I like it, and that's actually my real life thing too. I had a camera back in the day, and I used to only shoot basically with my 35. I don't know why.
Yeah, I've been using 35 too.
So a lot of
great minds.
I got my start with space art, and a lot of the cameras in space are very wide angle, 18, 19 millimeters. So I kind of got accustomed to using that, and I do like how wide angle looks.
Yeah,
so I still use that.
Looks sweet.
I don't think I have necessarily a definitive default focal length.
I want to go wider. That's all I gotta say.
Just go 0. Just you're in an orb.
Yep.
Yeah. No. I think all of us are pretty much wide angle lenses are better. I love telephoto photography, like the photography look in real life, right? Like that, where the foreground gets crunched down. But I think that just works in real life because there's just real terrain between your everything. And in 3D, of course, we just place stuff where it's visible. So I don't think that telephoto effect normally works that well.
Yeah.
It can work, but you really have to sort of build for it, as opposed to like it has to be a really intentional decision to make sure you have the resolution that holds up. Yeah.
Aaron, what do you usually use? You usually go 24?
15, 24, yeah. Like I'm wide.
Wow.
But then I also do wider aspect ratios as well. So
what's the aspect ratio you use, by the way?
Yeah, like Cinecrop, 15, 20. I mean, 15's wide, but it's like, I think Revenant is always my go-to, and I think that's 24. So that does that. It always feels like scale always feels better the longer lens that you can go.
Oh, that movie looks so good.
Yeah. And so I think
wider than your mama.
I'm just so sensitive to high map res that I generally just go like, yeah, never fisheye, but I'm like as
Yeah.
wide as I can get because I don't want to see anything crap. I want my terrain to look as sharp as possible, and yeah, just the more zoomed in you are, like that is less.
Yeah.
Like that possibility just goes down, down, down.
That's cool.
That's sick. Now, yeah, so basically it's up to your own taste, and we don't have much to offer other than we use wide angle.
I have time for one more question.
Okay. I kind of wanted to ask a kind of simple question, I suppose, but yeah, recommendations on foliage assets like sourcing. What are your favorite packs, bros? Like we love this.
Yeah, that's a good question.
We already know we make foliage assets ourselves, but like what are cool packs? Like we're sponsored, by the way, all these packs that we're mentioning.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'm getting paid for what I'm about to say.
Yeah, go for it.
That is a joke for legal reasons. That
is a joke. That is a joke.
Sam's
have just been amazed by Max Tree lately. Max Tree is amazing. That's all I have to say.
Max Tree does look amazing. I've bought a few of their packs, but they are definitely an investment. I don't know. It's Aaron. You use Max Tree as well?
I've been using Max Tree for a few years, but again, because most of my stuff has to be animated, I just can't. But Max Tree have you can buy grow effects, but I don't know anything about grow effects, and you can get animation from their models through that. But
uses grow effects.
Sorry, what was that?
Maui United, the folks.
Oh yeah.
They use grow effects.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. No, Max Tree. Yeah.
Is it for your animating, by the way? Do you just like use SpeedTree and then export the like Olympics? Because that's massive. Yeah. Like, oh god.
No, yeah, that's what I do. But generally, shots are only 2-3 seconds, so I just do 24 times 3. So the Olympics, 72 frames, and that's it.
I've done that, and it's like, painful. But do you scatter like those Olympics as instances?
Yeah, but I mean, for me, the way it works in Octane, it's the same as if it's a non-Olympic. Sorry, it's the same as if it's a static frame because it just draws per frame.
Well, about the animated trees, I like with my pine. I have a pine forest project with like an abandoned house in it, and for that, I just used. There's this guy named Istwood. Maybe you guys have heard of the mystical Istwood.
Istwood 45.
What a name.
Yeah, Istwood. And he
sounds like an Oblivion character.
Yeah, dude, he is an Oblivion character. And he creates trees, and they're super cheap. Like, you can get like a really beautiful pine tree pack for like $7 on CG Trader. And he's the same guy who collaborated with the, what's it called? Shaker trees for Blender, which is a really good asset library for Blender. But with those...
Shaker trees sponsor us.
Yeah, Shaker trees is great. And
please.
But what I did for those pine trees is I just animated it with noise modifiers, and I divided up.
You can do that. Yeah,
and it worked honestly pretty well, to the point where I feel confident that if I really wanted to, I could have it work and bypass SpeedTree for like simple, not like stormy, like for storm. Blowing in the leaves looks really good with SpeedTree, but if it's just blowing in the wind lightly, I think I could do noise modifiers.
You can. You totally can.
Do you just use like the displace on like the leaves or something, and then like the on the trunk you can use like
you weight paint out. Yeah, use a bend, and then you weight paint out where you don't want it to be affecting, and then you divide it up leaves, and then you divide up branches, big branches, and trunk, and then you can get a system that actually works pretty well.
I swear they had a new product come out which has those trees, like the 3D shaker trees, but it has animation and everything built into that. Like,
wouldn't it be great if there was a plugin where you could just drag the selection tags into an animating structure specifically for foliage, and it would weight paint automatically based off the selection tags that you're identifying. And then
That would be
so
really
you could
cool.
just animate based off a noise modulation via the selection tag, and then it happens straight away.
That'd be super cool.
I could probably do that.
And there you go.
Cook it
All
up.
right, cook
Charge
it
it,
up,
$35,
brother.
done.
One of the things that I've been working with my tree tools is instanced leaves. So those, of course, you have some control over the actual like orientation of them. So that's going to be something that we can work with. But also like, creating an attribute that has like it's like a weight mask for the different branches and stuff. That's something that like I'm already almost done with. And it's not too hard to translate that into like a GeoNode setup where you can get a pretty good tree effect.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I have to shout out as well. There's a blog called Common Point. Do any of you guys know Common
Love
Point?
Common
Yeah.
Point,
So
yeah.
Common Point have a bunch of really cool things that cover a lot of the things we've talked about, from like lighting, texturing, values, that sort of thing. But they also have done like a biome. There's a biome sort of section of that blog where they break down, I think it was 4 biomes. And there's a little ecosystem, and they've attached all the assets that they've used in those biomes. So from like 3D Sky to Evermotion to SpeedTree to MaxTree to whatever. So that's a really good resource as well, because you can get way cheap. MaxTree is premium, I would say now. Like it is XE, but you can get cheaper assets elsewhere. But I would go through Common Point to sort of find that, as opposed to just cowboying it. But
Yeah, there's so many assets out there. It's hard to say which ones are the best.
Common Point's freaking epic. So I'd check that out as far as foliage assets in particular. I mean, that portion of the blog at least.
Yeah.
I think there's like Evermotion. Shout out to them too, because they have a few free packs which have very high quality assets in there too. So if you're looking for free stuff, there's a lot of free stuff out there. I think like good quality free stuff. You're just not gonna have as diverse.
MaxTree, I think, have 3 packs.
Oh yeah, they have
$5 each.
Oh, okay, but they have a free one too. I think like a free sample pack.
It used to be free. I think that they've changed that though. Don't quote me. I thought they consolidated their free tiers into $5.
Okay, gotcha.
But
I would say be prepared to
wrong.
pay. Be prepared to pay for good foliage, especially trees. Be prepared to pay.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you want quality stuff, it's the same as like people hiring you, right? Like you'd like to be paid. If you're gonna get something for free, you're probably not gonna put your best effort into it. So it's the same for everybody in this world. The free stuff is limited in quality normally. I know a lot of Blender people are very opposed to paying sometimes. I'm sorry, but add-ons and paid assets are very much, good investments, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you could also get a Quixel Bridge subscription. LOL. No, you can't. I wish.
Don't talk.
Hopefully, Fab
angering
dialed in.
Yeah, Fab. Let's not start on that. That's then the last question we'll cover for today, since Cov is gonna have to do more important things than help the community, I guess.
Well, hey, if you guys want to keep going, that's totally fine.
I'm like thinking right now, like I need to go through the list of questions and kind of see which ones we've covered. Like, All
right, you can also say if there is follow up to this, I'm more than happy to do a part 2.
Yeah, honestly, I think we should do a part 2 because I think there's more questions to answer. And also, I think our audience can do better. I don't know because I think a lot of the people kind of thought AMA and they just went, yo, I'm going to ask Sam how to handle airplane battles, which, hey, shout out to that guy, but it's very specific. And I don't know if Sam can cover that in a podcast format.
Yeah.
Definitely like we should inspire people to ask more, and then maybe
next time we will critique your questions.
in the next video, we're going to go through all your questions and talk shit if it's a dumb one. You know, when your teacher in elementary school said there's no dumb questions, well, they were wrong. There is dumb questions.
Wait until I see YouTube comments.
All right, guys, that will be it for this video. We definitely have a follow-up that we want to do because there's definitely more questions out there that need to be answered, and we are very much having fun answering them all. I hope this was somewhat helpful, even though most of the answers are for you guys to study more and work harder, basically. We lost Cov along the way, but Aaron and Sam, thank you guys so much for sitting down. I don't know if you guys have anything to end it with, but definitely going to do a follow-up, I think. Sam, how do you feel about that?
I am more than on board. I am ecstatic. Okay. Yeah, this is really fun.
Okay, look forward to the follow-up. Add questions in the comment section. And it has to be good questions. Any bad questions, and we will publicly shame you in the next video. So
your questions will be critiqued.
Yeah, be afraid. Okay, you're going to get slandered. Just kidding. Ask away, and hopefully we can cover your needs and your questions. All right. We'll just cut it there. Well, outro music, smooth jazz.
Amazing.
Aaron, can you do some smooth jazz? That's